do it. Say it.
Oh, you're live.
He always wants to do like we're in a little, like
we're legit.
yes. Just say,
Hey.
speak, speak, voice, speak. Welcome to the Freeborn Podcast. Today I'm here with who is apparently my only friend. So I've been told this is my only friend. I've been calling everyone my friend, and apparently no one's my friend. Is that the case? Really? You all came on the show pretending to be my friend. And now I'm being told that I only have one friend, and that's because she's legally obligated to be my friend. And so today I'm here with Terri Jackson, my wife, for 29 years.
No? 28.
28.
Yeah,
Feels like 29.
I had to figure it out yesterday. How long have we been married? Literally, I was counting. I couldn't remember if it was 27 or 28, but it's 28.
It's 28.
Mm-hmm.
All right, 28 years. So, whew, I thought I was been married 29. So I feel young.
We're newlyweds.
We're newlyweds. It's like we're very young now.
Yeah.
Well, that's a relief. Well, this was supposed to be the 29th anniversary show, so I guess we'll have to just wait a year.
What do you mean the 29th?
Yeah, this was going to be the show we did on our 29 year. Yeah, no, our 29 marriage year anniversary show. But we're a year early.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, we'll do another one. That's kind of weird.
Anyway, so Terri wanted to come on the show. She wants to come on every week, and we have to
no.
we have to lock the door. And so if you hear banging during the shows and like a howling, "Let me in!" She loves the camera. She thinks the camera loves her, and so she wants to get her. She always wants to come on the show.
Right. Right. As soon as I sit down, I'm wondering what I got myself into. Like, oh no.
Oh, no, I'm joking. I actually had this like pulling teeth to get her to come on. She never wants to come on, but she did. She came on today, so I'm very, very happy and glad you're here.
Well, I like the topic.
Yes, we're going to talk about our marriage and why I'm wrong with it. I mean, what's wrong with it? I mean, we're going to talk
about our marriage in general, how we've evolved and digressed.
how we devolved.
Devolved.
Yeah, something like that. So I don't know if the viewers have noticed, it's kind of, I guess the cameras we got them kind of close, but maybe you've noticed we did a bunch of remodeling in the studio, in our home studio, my office, and new lighting, and got new drapes and paint and ceiling. We put a whole new ceiling in here and got it cooled down and got better air conditioning in here. So,
although it lacks a female touch. Sorry.
What's a female touch?
I don't know. More aesthetics, maybe some greenery.
No, there's no greenery.
Some brighter
I hate
pillows
greenery.
on the chairs.
We've been married 28 years. You don't know that I can't.
I do
hate
know
greenery.
that. I just keep hoping that you'll change. How that just livens up every room.
It's fake
And it's
trees.
a great backdrop.
Whoever looks at a tree in a house and thinks, "Boy, I wonder how that tree got here." I mean, it's fake. It's not. Who has a tree in the house unless?
Well, not a real. No. What?
Well, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. It's all fake. It's just like, whoever thought, let's go get a tree and let's bring it in the house and put it in the house. We build houses to keep nature out.
No, you bring.
We don't want to bring.
in.
No. Houses are to keep nature out.
Yeah, it's what. Yeah, I mean, I know that's not everybody's, but I love greenery. I love greenery, and the realer it looks, the better, but I don't like it real. I don't want to take care of it. I want to look at it, and it has to be pretty all the time.
But greenery it's mutual with greenery because it doesn't want you to take care of it either because you kill everything you touch. The only thing you don't have, you can't manage to kill is the grass that grows
where. You don't like my gardening skills?
No. So a long time ago in Toluca, she decided she needed a hobby. And so she went and bought pots and plants and dirt. And she was going to start having flowers or whatever they were.
Yeah.
And she took the pots, she filled them with dirt, and then she took the plant and set it on top of the dirt. That was her planting skills. Marco Chaitis, my brother-in-law, came over to the house and looked in and saw what she had done and spent the whole day repotting her plants for her so she could have a hobby. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
And she's like, man, this is easy. I don't
I
know why
like
more people
this."
don't do gardening. The plant was literally begging for mercy. Help, someone save me.
I know.
Oh, it's terrible.
I know. I like the inside. I like air conditioning. No.
Yeah, that was the end of that hobby. So anyways, yeah, we did a bunch of remodeling in here. Hopefully it's looking a little better. Got better cameras, better lights. So hopefully everything's looking better for the podcast. It looks good over here. I'm looking at it on the thing. It looks super clear. So that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah. What's wrong?
Sorry, guys. We had you on. We had this video on Unlisted.
Oh, it was?
Yes, I just changed it now.
How did that happen?
I don't know.
That must have been you.
No.
No?
No, I just copied the stream key.
All right.
So what does that mean, unlisted?
Means no one could see it publicly.
You could hear it?
No.
Oh.
No. It's,
Well, they could if you found it. If you went through the guy got it through Facebook.
that's
So
fair.
anyone who's went through Facebook could have found it.
Okay.
But,
So you need to redo the introduction.
No, it's there.
Okay.
It's all recorded.
I see.
It just if you went through YouTube, you weren't going to find the video.
I see. Okay.
But if you would go through the Facebook link, you could have clicked on it.
Oh, Facebook.
Yeah, and seen it. So it's fine. Nobody wants to hear me rag on you. They want to hear you rag on me.
No.
Everyone tunes in to hear how other people tell me mis verdades, like they say in Spanish.
Why do you think that is?
I don't
Have
know.
you looked deep down inside yourself?
I have,
figure
and
out why
I
it
have,
is?
and all I see is wonderful things.
Really?
Deep down. Oh, it's deep as I
Wow,
look.
that must be nice.
Yeah.
To be that delusional.
To be that delusional. So you wanted to come on and talk about marriage.
Yes and no. I don't know. Yes, I did. I wanted to talk about marriage. I wanted to talk, just kind of our journey and our experiences and what gets us through and our successes and maybe a little bit of not so much of a success. And then, maybe there's somebody that has questions or, just general advice.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So what is the number one question you're asked about our marriage?
How I deal with you.
I didn't even take a second. Didn't even take a split second to think about that. I didn't even prep her for it. It's just like, bam, right there.
Yeah, it's funny because I guess and that hasn't not been recent. It's been a while since people ask me questions, about our relationship. But yeah, I definitely have been asked, like, if I'm like scared or how do I give my opinion? It's like they have a perception of you, and they think that you're like that all the time.
But I'm not like that any of the time.
No, and again, it's been a while. I don't normally get asked, about our relationship very often. No, so yeah, but that is always has stood out to me. I always think that was funny. And like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Yeah, right.
I guess give me names. I want to know who's been asking this. I'm coming for you.
Well, I've been asked that more from people from Mexico, obviously, not here. And they usually are from Leon. So maybe those are the people that knew you way back
When I was
then.
12?
Yeah.
When I was 13? That's a problem with this.
Well, I know.
People.
It is. And that, honestly, nothing makes me more irritated than that. Because,
You can move back. Just
Okay.
move the microphone back with you.
all right.
You just
I
got to
gotta
kind of,
remember that it's
you just keep it at the same distance all the time. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I can remember, people tend to
You're good.
associate still the 45, 46-year-old you with the 15, 14-year-old you. And it makes me just, just don't, because if you want to go down that road, well, we can, and we can bring up all the stupid things you've done and said, and like we all have. I would not want to be compared, with the dumb things I might have said and done, as a teen, as an adolescent, and trying to figure yourself out, and then being accused of being the same way.
Yeah, it is. It is a very odd way in which, I mean, I know it's hard. I mean, especially, if you're an adult and somebody's a child or even a teenager, and you grow up with them, or they grow up around you, so you like, corrected them. You're like, especially as close as we tended to be with the other missionary families and the churches. Even, I mean, it was like having 49 parents sometimes, and they're all, basically parenting you, and then all of a sudden you're 20 or you're 30, and then you're all, if time goes by so fast, and all of a sudden you look over and this person that you were like their surrogate parent in some ways at times, all of a sudden now they're grown adult with kids, and I imagine it would be very hard to then look at that person as not still being a kid and not remember, things they've done.
Yeah.
And especially for some reason, it seems to me that Christianity, at least as we've experienced it, has a real problem with tolerance and with forgiveness. And I put myself in that thing. I mean, I've been working. This is one of the things. So I always try to find something to work on in my character, and try to fix something, improve in some way. So I don't want to be the same person I was like a year ago. So that's always a big thing with me, is every year I'd like to see something different, be different in some way, and obviously try to be different better. Right? And there's so many things to do, and your list, of course, is much longer than my list of things that I need to fix. But I go with my list. But one of the things that I'm trying to work on is not being so intolerant and unforgiving to other people's peccadillos, to other people's idiosyncrasies.
Yeah.
And it's hard because, I think one of the reasons why fundamentalist Christianity tends to be that way is because they're trying hard to balance the not being like capitulating, not being, what is it? Overly accepting of bad behavior. Like, oh, we don't judge anything. It's like, it's that whole thing, that church that we used to be over there on 410 that said, we don't judge or condemn you. And that would always get all this mocking and maybe that's not the best message for a church to put out, right? As to put forward for itself.
Yes.
At the same time, I understand in part why they would want to make that clear that, people tend to look at Christian church, especially fundamentalists or Southern churches, and they look at those, and that's the perception they have. That
we've been stereotyped. Southern Christianity.
I think we've stereotyped ourselves. And you can look at it and say, oh, no, that's not how we really are. Well, I don't know about anyone else. That's how I really was. And I still, in my own mind, have that battle of not being that way. And it's difficult. How do you hold to convictions and at the same time not be overly judgmental and condemning of other people, even if they're wrong? See, this is what the thing is. It's like, look, I shouldn't be judgmental as long as you're right. So if you're right and you're pure, I won't condemn you. Well, that's not that obviously not. What you're saying is, if I look at you and I see a mirror image of me, then I'm not going to judge or condemn you. Well, how big of you, right? And at the same time, then you're worried, well, then we're going to become these liberal Christians who just say everything is fine and God loves everybody the same and there's nothing wrong with anything. And that is very obviously going in the total opposite direction of where we should be going.
Yeah. And
so I don't know, it's a very hard thing to balance. So I get it. I mean, I sympathize with it. And obviously right now I'm trying to figure that out, how you do that. But I do know people who there's no doubt. See, I think Dale West was always that way. There was no doubt as to where he stood on issues.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There was no doubt as to whether or not he agreed or disagreed with fornication or abortion or anything of these things. And yet there was also no doubt that he accepted people, or I don't know if accepted is the right word. I don't even know if there's the right word, but he loved people unconditionally.
Yes.
Even if he's in the middle of telling them that he passionately disagrees with their living, at the same time he loved them, and I would think in an unconditional way, which I think is just an amazing character trait.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's one that we don't find a lot in Christians. Got a little noise in there. I don't know what that is.
No, that's true. And and speaking, we're, talking about marriage, is that so many couples also go into that, their relationship, especially in the first years, expecting for you to behave a certain way and projecting your own thoughts and your own feelings and your own worldview of life and the Bible, whatever. And when you're confronted with somebody who has a different opinion than you, it's a little bit jarring. You find it hard to tolerate that because you're supposed to be the same as me.
Yeah.
And so tolerating your spouse's individuality, it's not easy.
No, it's not.
It's not easy for a lot of couples. You become, defensive.
Yes.
Yeah, and you tend to also you have to put where they're coming from into perspective, their upbringing, just where their perception is coming from, your past and your experiences and all of that all molds you into the adult that you've married. And then you're dealing with that, because I had a certain way of growing up, and what I saw growing up in my own parents, and what I was told what marriage is and what marriage isn't, and relationships with the opposite sex. I didn't have a lot of experience. I didn't have a lot of boyfriends, so I never got into arguments with a boyfriend because I never was close enough to anybody to care. And then here I am, I'm married. The first year, you have a completely different experience. You grew up completely different. You had expectations that I didn't really realize you have, and you think that you know before you marry that person, and you really don't. So there are expectations of behavior and how do we resolve conflict. We had no idea how to resolve conflict, and because I never saw it. My parents never fought.
Yeah.
And I know most people have a hard time believing that, but they never fought, which was blissful as a child growing up. I have no experience with what it's like to see your parents fight. None. So it's an amazing as a child, but I also didn't see them resolve conflict. And because I didn't have deep relationships with the opposite sex, with having boyfriends, I didn't know what to do. So I just figured I'm going to come into this marriage, and if we have a disagreement, you're going to be a little quiet. And then we're going to sit down, we're going to talk, and we're going to pat each other, and it's just all going to be nice. And we go on with our day. And oh no, boy, did I get a whole other reality that I had to deal with. And granted, you're just still, a kid, really, and so am I. But I am 4 years older than you.
5.
No, 4.
5 years, or 5 years older.
Okay, you want to keep saying that. So, we had a lot to overcome. Don't you think? Or did you not have that? Did you not see it that way? Because I know males and females see things differently.
I didn't see it that way at all. I mean,
that's curious.
Yeah. I don't really remember. Don't remember much.
And I remember so vividly.
Really?
Yes, everything. Oh, yes. Oh, I can play it back in
Oh.
my head. No, it's terrible. It is. I do not recommend doing that. But women do. Women do that.
No,
I
I
play
don't-
back certain experiences and feelings. I can still feel the same way.
I don't remember any of that. I remember that everything was great. We got married. The only thing is you didn't know how to cook. You couldn't boil water, which
I
was
could boil water.
you couldn't boil water. And you're trying to argue that she could. She's like, I could too boil water. Like if that's an actual defense. Like that's oh, excuse me. She could boil water.
Yeah, my idea of cooking was getting it out of the box in the frozen section. and
Yes.
reading the instructions.
Yeah. I was
The
definitely
crispy nuggets.
and see,
came
I
out
knew how to
perfect.
cook. I lived alone for a couple years
Yeah,
before we
believe
got
it or
married.
not, you were 18, but you still had been on your own for how long?
2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For 2 years.
For 2 years.
Yes. See,
And
that
so-
was helpful for me, though, in even deciding to marry you, that I didn't feel like I was marrying somebody completely inexperienced and just right out of their mom and dad's house.
Right.
You know, that because I had lived on my own, too, for
Mm-hmm.
a couple years or 3 years or so. So I didn't, that was very helpful in deciding, you know, well, you've been on your own. You live in your own house. You know, you take care of yourself. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I would cook and have people over and make meals and bake pies and all of that stuff. And then married you, and then it's like,
Yeah, I didn't know anything.
didn't know
about that.
anything. Yeah. So you had to learn how to cook.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't have to learn how to take care of the house, though. I
No,
was good at
no,
that.
you're always good at that. Always everything. I remember when Cole was when you were pregnant with Cole and your water broke and it made you the pain made you real sick and then you threw up on the floor.
Yeah.
And I'm running out to get
Trying to find a phone. We didn't have a phone.
right. There was no phones back then in our houses in Mexico, so I'm trying to find a phone to make some calls to get the doctor or whatever, and then I come back and you're mopping the floor. She's cleaning the floor when she's in labor.
Yeah.
And I said, "You missed the spot."
I'm such a jerk.
I didn't help either. I'm like, "Hurry up, we gotta go."
Yeah, I'm a little OCD.
just a tad,
Yeah, certain things, yes, I will admit. Yeah, OCD.
which is what is so annoying. This has been one of the. There's a few things that annoy me about you, and has annoyed me for 28 years. It feels like 38.
So we're going to air our dirty laundry.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and air our
publicly.
yes, let's go ahead and air our dirty laundry. But
great
it is
time
so
to-
annoying. The whole OCD cleaning.
See, I've been heard we deserve each other in that area.
Really? How
I
am
am-
I OCD?
Michael.
Hold on. Let
Oh.
me put my headphones
Nolan
on.
needs to get involved.
I need to clear some stuff up. You're extremely OCD.
Yeah.
Psycho OCD.
Who are you talking
I'm
to?
talking to both of you. Both of you.
Yes,
really.
see, we
You're both
do.
very-
How am I
In
OCD?
different ways.
Oh, and
That's the way you
you're
like
controlling.
things.
You gotta have your hand on
Put your
things.
microphone better. No, yeah, no, better. A little lower.
Oh my goodness. It's gonna be
He's all
sad.
doing it. You
When-
can tell he's traumatized because he's all like, yes, okay.
Yeah, I know. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
He's so
He
used
needs
to-
his
you're so
hands on
used to
things.
going along
He
with
needs
it.
to have his hand. So give an example. It's probably better to understand it this way. He'll go, "We need to fix your van, Nolan." Okay. Go, you just bring it over. I'll tell you what you do. You'll fix it. I normally never put my work clothes on because I normally always never
He's
have
gonna
to do
take
anything.
over.
Oh yeah, he goes. So you're gonna take that off. Look like this, and then you're gonna want to take that off like this, and then once you're done with that, take that off like this. And I'm just watching. I'm like, that's great, Dad. I'm learning so much. I would love to start, but I'm gonna go ahead and go inside. You let me know when it's done. And it's not that he wants to do it. He hates working on cars. He would love it for me to do it.
Exactly.
And in his head, he's going,
This
why am
lazy
I
bum."
doing this?
Yes.
He's just watching me, but won't let go of the wrench. He's like, let go of the wrench. And he can't. It's impossible for him.
This was supposed to be about what's wrong with her. You and I, we had an agreement about what this podcast
I
was going to
know.
be, and now you're turning on me.
It's nice every now and again. Usually he takes your side. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
He obviously wants something. No, I mean, if I tell you what I don't like, then you guys are going to gang up on me. You know, and that was what you were saying, though, going a little more seriously. But, you know, I don't remember. I know there's a little bit, but we didn't have a bad first year, I don't think.
No.
I mean,
we didn't.
I've heard of people that say their, you know, how their first year, or first 3 years, or first 5 years, or 10 years of marriage were. And we didn't have, I don't think we've had a bad year yet.
No.
I'm expecting number 30 to be our bad
Well,
year.
it could.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it could.
See how she says it like a threat.
Take nothing for granted.
It's coming. It's coming.
The storm could
It's like
come.
Proverbs. It's like a walking man, slow but sure. Here it comes.
It can come.
That's hilarious.
Well, no, that's true. I've always has said that. We've had some really bad days. Some really bad days. You probably don't remember. It's probably a good thing you don't remember.
I remember the soup day. The
soup?
Chinese soup day.
Okay, refresh my memory.
You don't remember? See, she remembers only the things that
That
she
you
thinks
did?
I did wrong.
What did I do on the soup day?
Remember, I wanted to make the Chinese hot and sour soup in Toluca,
Yes. Okay.
and you were mad because I was making 3/4 of a pot
bunch.
instead of a half a pot.
yes.
But it's basically water and a bouillon cube. No matter how you do it, I mean, it's
okay,
like.
not that simple. Nothing is ever that simple. Do not describe.
But what
the
did you
soup
have to
that way.
do? What did you have to do?
Okay,
Oh,
so
we're gonna
here's the
relive
thing.
this. We're getting into this.
Is this the time where he broke the tip off the knife? by
Probably.
stabbing it into
It's
the
where I
table?
stabbed the knife through the wood cutting board
Yeah, it went all the way through
and
it,
broke
then-
off on the metal. We had
When you
we had
say
metal
stab the
countertops.
knife, that sounds so violent.
I was like, wham! I was so mad, and it split the cutting board in half. Yeah, that was all you.
Right. So at face value, it sounds like I'm being very nitpicky. But in my defense, which I have to do, you're a very extreme person. So when I send you out to the store, I need
would
a
you say
couple of tomatoes. Literally, you bring like the whole like person's garden of tomatoes. Like bushels, and I don't know what they call it, bushels. I have
Yeah,
no
bushels,
idea.
yeah.
Bushels and bushels of. Babe, I need 2. Oh well, they're on sale. You may as well, have 100. We'll just keep them there. They'll be fine. I'll make tomato sauce with it or something weird, which you never do. But this is my experience with you. Everything is in the extreme. So you feel like soup. So let's make 10 gallons of soup. Yeah, it was pretty much that much you wanted to make. It was a lot.
It was a pot.
It seemed like a lot. Yeah. However, that's where my OCD does come in.
Well, yeah,
because I
because-
have a picture in my mind of what the perfect amount is.
Yeah, and remember the cereal? Oh, she pours cereal. She'll
Used to
like,
pour cereal for us.
yes,
And then go, oh, that's too much, and like take off a couple of grains of whatever. it
Every
was.
time.
Every single time. Oh, that's too much, and have like
3
3 of them in her
flakes.
hand, throw them back in the box. That's perfect. That's the perfect amount of cereal.
yes, every time it'll be like she'll pour even for herself. She'll pour it in and then pour some back, but it'll be like drips, practically with an eyedropper. Drip, drip, drip. Perfect. Now we got the perfect amount in the. It's like, what are you doing? She does it every time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would.
And so I made, like I said, instead of making 7 cups, I made 8.5 cups, and that was like not acceptable. Not acceptable.
Yeah.
Anyways, my point that I was going to make was that whatever troubles we had in our marriage is taking into account how much of our value systems we shared already.
Yes.
I mean, we came from identical backgrounds in reality. I mean,
Right.
comparatively speaking to most people who are meeting their spouse at work or at clubs or at bars or at gyms or wherever people meet people.
Yeah.
Whereas where you're not sharing any of the essential values in life. This is what people don't understand. I try to tell young people, you have to meet your spouse at the family reunion if you. No, I'm joking. Oh, so that's the other side of my family. That's the side of my family where the tree doesn't fork.
The Jackson
Yeah,
side.
the Jackson side, it grows like a pine tree. There's no fork in the tree.
That's your problem, Ben.
That is a problem. That if you ever wonder why incest is a bad idea, look
Yeah.
no further. So it's not. I'm not to blame. No, I mean, people are. You find someone and you meet them at the movie theater, you meet them at the gym, you meet them at a club or a bar, you meet them at work. What joins people in those environments are very superficial values. What movies you like.
Yeah.
That's not something to build a marriage on. What kind of aerobics you prefer.
Right.
What kind of clubs you like to go to. What kind of alcoholic drinks you like to consume. These are not things that are even. I'm not even speaking as to the merit of those things, whether they're good or bad. It doesn't matter. Those are not fundamental values in life. Those are extremely superficial values in life. Those are things where that would be fine to be different from your spouse on. To like different movies is perfectly fine. That's not going to cause the majority of marriages any problem whatsoever if they like different movies.
Yeah.
If they prefer different forms of exercise, or if they or if they like one drink over another drink, and none of that is going to make any difference in marriage. Hardly, very little.
Yeah.
It's the fundamental values. And that's where we were from the exact same cloth.
Right.
Right? We grew up in the same church. We heard the same preaching. We had the same values.
We knew each other's parents,
Oh, yeah.
and that was big. That
Big.
was a big
Our
deal.
parents knew each other. We knew each other's parents. And we knew what we knew what we had been listening to 2 hours, or actually we went to 3 meetings a week. And so you're looking at 6 hours of value-oriented teaching a week, and we knew what we had been listening to for 6 hours a week for 52 weeks a year.
Right.
And I'd been in church since I was 6 that I can remember, right? And so when you think about that, I mean, you just think about, you say, I want a spouse, I want to marry someone who shares my values. Well, that's not like something that just happens. Values don't fall out of the sky, and they're not inherent, right? They don't inherently come into us or exist in us.
Yes.
They have to be taught. And so the number one source of values in anyone's life is your parents or whoever raises you, because they're with you all the time, right? That's why kids look like or act like and speak like their parents so much. It's not just genetics. I mean, there is an element of genetics, which is the way your voice will sound. But even then, your accent and everything you get not genetically. People don't have an Indian accent because they're genetic Indians. They have an Indian accent because they learn to speak in India, and then that sticks with them.
Right.
And when people move to other places, like I have cousins that move to England, and they sound like English. They have an English accent, a Cockney accent.
Right. Right.
So that isn't what's in you. That's what's around you. And so the number one source of influence, value influence in a person's life is going to be their parents or their caregivers, whoever's raising them. That's number one. The number two source of values, I think, for Christians, especially fundamentalists, is going to be church. Because that is hours and hours and hours of indoctrination. That's what it is.
Right.
And with our case, it's 6 hours a week.
Well, in our case, also, I don't know if everybody realizes this, but you and I did not date. There was no social media back then. There's no FaceTime. You were in Mexico. I was in Dallas.
And phones were very expensive.
Very long. Oh, boy, did I get a bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. I was literally in tears.
Hundreds of dollars.
Oh, yes, yes. So, yeah, we didn't have any. Our form of
Well, we're going to get into that topic.
our form of communication shoot was through letters, old-fashioned letters.
Wrote a lot of
in
letters
the mail. That was how we. And then I went to visit you just one time, but we didn't date. We just didn't, and we just decided to get married. And the reason why I could do that was because of that. We came from the same church. I knew your parents, loved your parents. I knew your grandparents, loved your grandparents, and I respected them highly. So I knew you came from a really good family. and I wanted to be a part, and because I wanted to be in the ministry in Mexico very bad. I really did not think that, I thought that was just something that I really wanted. I didn't think that the Lord was going to hand that to me. And then you came along knocking on my door, literally.
Yeah, when I was
Literally.
17 maybe.
You were 17.
Yeah. I drove up all the way from Mexico to Dallas.
Yep.
And she didn't know, they didn't know I was going. I just showed up at their house, at the Noyola's house.
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
I said, of course you did, like a psycho. Like a psycho boy.
Yeah, it was a little strange. You're
like, hello. I'm here for a week.
Yeah. Yes. And so that was a little bit of time that we got to know each other a little bit better. But my what I wanted was, I wanted that ministry. You had already committed yourself to that ministry in Mexico, and I wanted to be a part of that. And so was it like this, like, sweep me off my feet kind of like fairy tale, what you see in the movies kind of love, maybe not in the beginning, but I knew where I wanted to see my life. I knew the path that I wanted to take, and you were a part of that, and I wanted to be a part of that. And so we decided to joined our lives together to make that happen.
Right.
Is what
That's
we
right.
did.
Yeah, exactly. And so because we had all these, this common value system, I think that was very helpful in keeping us from having a terrible marriage that could have been.
Yes.
Because, people are like, well, you got to get to know these people. And I understand what they're saying, because they're meeting people that they know nothing about. And this is getting more and more dangerous. I mean, I've been thinking about this. We only have one child left that's not married. And so, it's not as how would I put it? It's not as a big of an issue in my mind as maybe it should be for those of you who have, for those that have younger children. But people need to start thinking about how risky this is getting, to go and meet someone you know nothing about for romantic purposes, like to get married. Even if you have a traditional view, we're not going to fornicate, we're not going to live together, I'm going to meet someone, I'm going to marry them. You don't even know if you're getting a boy or a girl anymore. You can't know. There's no way to know. And if that doesn't scare you to death, those of you that are single and you want to meet somebody and you're not scared to death that you could actually like date somebody and then end up being a man or a woman that you weren't expecting, that you're expecting the opposite. This is why we have, I mean, let's set aside the spiritual and realities, the spiritual truths of church and Christianity. People are like, what good is church? Church is a place where we share where we come together and agree upon a common fundamental core of values, right? Where then we can find spouses in. Just from a social, from a social perspective, not from a religious one or a truth one or having to God. If you're just saying, what is there any value in church? Even people who are like agnostic and they're like, I'm not going to church, there's no value there. There is an incredible amount of value there, one you cannot replicate anywhere else. And because churches hold to a certain, churches have a social pass to enforce, now it's going away, but they have a social pass by society to enforce a set of values that you can't enforce in any other area.
Right.
So schools can't do it, bars can't do it, movie theaters can't do it. Anywhere you might think I'm going to go meet a person, they're not enforcing any type of moralistic, any type of traditional type set of values. So you don't know what you're getting in these places.
Yeah.
I mean, you're literally reaching your hand into a bag of diamonds with a snake in there. It's a black bag and it has diamonds and it has lumps of coal and it has snakes, venomous snakes. And you're reaching your hand in hoping you pull out a diamond. That is what you do when you go to these like clubs and things. This is what you're getting because they don't have the social permission to enforce and say that no transgender women, no transgender men are allowed in this club. They're not legally allowed to make those kind of things. This is why even people who don't agree with a church's stand on these things, like there's a lot of people who don't like that churches will want to enforce traditional monogamous marriage. But that's the only place where anyone who sees that as being important to them can go and know this is a place where I'm not worried about whether the boys are boys and the girls are girls. I mean, and I know that, look, there's going to be a lot of people, I say a lot, I don't have a lot of people listening to me. There's going to be a number of people who are going to hear about this, and they're going to be all upset that I'm saying this because they think that somehow I'm trying to, like, humanize, or I'm trying to despiritualize church, and I've turned all liberal. Like I said at the beginning, set all of the spiritual truths aside.
Right.
And if I was speaking to someone who's completely agnostic and they're saying, make a case for why churches should still exist the way they are and why the government shouldn't regulate them and force them to abide by the same rules that businesses have to abide by, who they can allow in, who can be their pastors, who can be part of their organization, who can do that. Why is that? Because anyone who wants a traditional marriage and a traditional family, anyone who wants that themselves has nowhere to go to reliably find mates that subscribe to that same paradigm. There's no other place to go. So just from that standpoint, that is the case for church.
Right.
And this is why Christians should not be looking for spouses outside of church. It's a bad place to go and look for a spouse in a country club, or I guess no one goes to country clubs, not in our groups anyways, but in a bar, in a workout gym, and anywhere. You should be looking for a spouse in your church or in churches that are very like-minded.
Right.
Not just any church either.
Right.
You should be going and I'm not saying that we all have to marry within the same congregation, because that gets, it gets to the point where when we know churches that are like this, where it's like everybody in the church is family. Everybody's related.
Well, I think, too, that we shouldn't dismiss online forums and online dating sites that are specifically for Christians. You can go on certain, not that I know from experience, but you can specifically find online dating sites that have your values, and you find people like
But see,
that.
I don't have any problem with doing it virtually. But to me, online is, people hear online and they're thinking it's another world. And in some ways it kind of is, but it doesn't have to be. And in many ways, the online is just like a telephone. It's just a technology, right? But if those people that share those values you're talking about, if they're not actually attending a church that is like-minded to yours in the things you value, and I'm not trying to tell anybody what that has to be.
Yeah.
Right? You may be very liberal in your ideology and go to a very liberal church, and then you should be looking for a spouse from that category of churches. So it's fine to go use the technology of the online, like you're saying. I agree, but those people that you're considering need to actually have a track record of meeting in a like-minded church. And if they don't, you shouldn't be considering them. It's a very bad idea.
Right.
It's a very bad idea. I think it's a terrible idea to find a spouse at work. Terrible idea. I'm not saying it never works out.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you
Of
can't make...
course.
I am of the belief that you can make any marriage work. Any marriage can be made to work. Now, one person can't. So if you're in a marriage and the husband doesn't want to be there, or the wife doesn't want to be there, well, the other person can't make it work on their own. It just can't. It requires both people. I don't subscribe at all to this whole like fireproof movie concept that one person can save the marriage. Maybe now and then, maybe occasionally, but as a strategy, no, it's a dead end strategy.
Yeah.
Because we live in a time where any side can get the divorce. You don't have to get consent. Right? Used to be where if you wanted to divorce your wife, she had to grant you a divorce, right? Because it was a contract, a binding legal contract that you couldn't just walk away from. It was more binding than renting a house. And when you rent a house, the landlord can't come and say, hey, you're evicted. They have a contract. He can't kick you out, and you can't just walk away. And marriage was more binding. Now it's less. It's so sad, the sad state of our society where marriage is now less binding than renting an apartment. But that's where we're in. That's, if we can lament about it all day, but
Yeah.
that's the reality we live in, which means that that one person is not going to be able to fix the marriage. I mean, they can work at it and try and pray and ask God to work in the marriage, and it occasionally will happen. But to reliably say one person, if you're in a bad marriage and their husband or the wife don't want to be there, and the spouse can fix it, I just think that's a pipe dream. That just most likely that is not going to case. I would encourage them to try.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not saying don't try, but to me that's just. But you can be in a bad marriage, and that was where our value systems came together, right? And that we would say, no matter what, our pact from the very beginning was we are never going to threaten divorce. And we've never talked about divorce and even mentioned the word in any serious context.
Right.
And we never even joked about
Right.
getting divorced. I mean, that was like our Voldemort, right? That was something that would never be mentioned, ever, no matter how angry. So we would threaten to kill each other. And we would plot on murder, right? And how to get away with it, but never divorce. Murder maybe, divorce never. That was always our mantra.
Well, and because of that, because we had that mindset, and I had that mindset that I committed, and I took that very seriously. I took our vows very seriously. So, all the way to the death, right? My death or your death, whichever.
Sooner
didn't
rather
matter.
than
It
later
didn't
at
matter.
times.
That we're just gonna stick this out. So then anytime I felt so upset and so frustrated, or whatever it is, just one of those days or just one of those weeks, it just is not panning out quite the way I thought it should, then I had to sit back, because I'm not the type to cry to people about certain things, like this. So I didn't have really a lot of people that I can talk to. And if I did, it's usually I had to suck it up, because you're the man, and whatever you do, you just suck it up. That's how I felt. I don't know if that advice is true, but I felt like
It is true. It is so true.
I was not going to get anyway, at least that's how I felt like maybe that's what I told myself. Maybe that's the advice I gave. Just suck it up. So, but what in reality, what I told myself was I have a choice to make. I can stay angry and let that turn into bitterness and root deep into my life. Then I'm mad every day. Then I'm bitter every day. Then I'm miserable every day for the rest of my life. Or I can suck it up and get over it, or talk to you about it if it's something that still bothered me, say 2 or 3 days later, because usually it would pass.
Right.
So if I thought, if it still bothers me, then it's worth talking to you about, and it's worth maybe getting in an argument over.
That was what was always
disgusting.
interesting to me about how different you and I are, because neither one of us really hold grudges.
No.
But I get over things like in seconds.
Yes.
I'll get like super mad and then like done.
Yeah, it's done.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, let's go get something to eat.
Hey, you don't even remember what
I don't remember.
we were arguing about.
No.
Like, what? What did I do? What? What did I say? What are you talking about? Nothing. Oh, that makes me so mad when you do that. Here I am all hurt and feeling. He's like, what are you talking about? Do I really have to just tell you? But yes, that is true, which is a blessing and a curse.
It's a blessing for me and a curse for you.
No, it's both. No, I love that you just get over things, that you're not going to be mad forever. The kids love it, that you can be super upset, and 5 minutes later you're fine.
I've
you let off
learned to
steam.
just not answer his phone calls.
Just let it pass.
Yeah, I know what he's calling me.
Can you
for.
tell when I have
can
an
hear
angry
him
ring?
Screaming through the ring.
Yes.
So I was just like, not answer that one. And then and then finally he calls again. He goes, "Hey, what's up?"
Yeah. Hey, buddy. How's it going?
How's it going, bud? sound great.
No, that's true. So because of that, I decided, okay, I'm not going to be miserable. I have a choice. That's my choice. Be miserable or be happy. And look for the good in you, and look for the good in our marriage, and look for the good in everything that and what the life that we've built together. And then usually that's going to just I'll get over it. But you can let things fester, and especially if you think that there is an out somewhere.
Yeah.
You can, it's very easy because you tell yourself you don't have to take it. Well, unless there's something really serious, no, you really should. You really kind of do.
Yes.
And work things out. Now, nobody has to stay miserable.
Well, no, that's the thing, and that exactly. I mean, it's the same thing with marriage. It's the same way with children. People think, I don't want to be miserable. That means the other person has to make me happy. And as long as you think that way, you're never going to be happy.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's the thing too, and this is something that I've learned, and I've said this before, that a marriage relationship isn't a replacement relationship. So a marriage relationship, they're and especially a woman's life, but a man too. We need other relationships in our life, and your marital spousal relationship is something completely separate. So my relationship with you, or my relationship with one of my best friends, it doesn't replace one or the other. They're both necessary.
Right.
And you need them both to feel whole and complete or happy, because there are ways that my best friends can fulfill certain parts of my life and certain parts of my personality that you necessarily can't do. But there's so many women out there that expect their husbands to fulfill all of those needs that they have. I need somebody who's going to listen to me incessantly for hours, repeating the same thing over and over. Okay, you're not going to do that, right? Because you're a fixer. You're not necessarily a listener. And that's most men. They want to fix it. Let's talk about it for 10 minutes. Let's come up with a solution and let's fix it. Well, you know what? I don't want to fix it. I just want to vent. And I just want to talk to, yes. So I have my sisters for that, they'll listen to me for hours. And I have my best friends, they'll listen to me, and we can talk and go. And that's just, it fulfills a need that most women have. So to expect you to do that, well, that's not fair. And so that's what so many women do. They want to use their spousal relationship to replace all of their others, for them to fulfill. And then there's another need that every human has, and there's a space there in our hearts that can only be filled through Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. That is the only way it can be filled. Only the Holy Spirit can totally renew your outlook and your life, and change certain things about you that can change, or that can fulfill this deep need that you have to feel loved no matter what, to feel accepted no matter what you've done, no matter what is going on in your life, to have that forgiveness. Only Jesus can do that.
Right.
But we want our husbands to. We want our husbands to fulfill that need we're looking for. I mean, when they don't, we're angry and we're resentful. And why can't you make me feel this way? Well, because it's not his job.
Right.
That's not what he does. That's Jesus. That's what Jesus does in your life. That's what Christ does. Christ fulfills that need. You're putting something on your spouse that is impossible for him to fill, because that's not who he is. It's a different relationship. And I think that's something that I have kind of had to learn through our early years of marriage, that my friends and my other relationships are not as important as you, and they never should be. My relationship with you was always first. I always wanted that to be better. If I lost friends, if other people were mad at me, if they didn't want to talk to me anymore, that's fine. But that's not acceptable for my spouse to feel that way. So it was very important to me that you liked me all the time, and I wanted that. So I don't like to make you mad. I don't like, for you to be irritated, like really, really irritated with me. It's not acceptable for me. But I also know that you can't fulfill a part of my life that only Jesus can fulfill.
Right.
Yeah.
That's very good. One of when I think about the value conversation we're talking about, and how we shared values, there was a number of things that we really looked at as far as what values we were worried about, because we didn't agree on everything.
No.
Not even everything. We didn't really have doctrinal conversations before we got married, and I honestly think that people that want to get married should. I think they should discuss doctrine. I don't think, especially if you're coming from a background like ours, where church is really about doctrine, which I still like that. I think
when you share a ministry.
Yeah, you're going to share ministry even more so.
Yeah.
I think that what your view of the place of the role of women. I say the place. I mean the role of women in church and ministry, the role of men and women in marriage, and as far as doctrinally speaking, that all should be discussed with a pastor, and should be discussed in a way that's not just a checking off the box. Like, I think too many people do premarital advice or counseling, but they're just checking off a box. They're not actually open to the fact that maybe they shouldn't get married. They just want to check off that box. And to those people, I tell them, don't talk to me.
Oh, yeah. We've had experience.
Yeah, no, don't talk to me if you just want to check the box.
I literally wanted to get on my knees and apologize. Like, I am so sorry you left here so sad. You're supposed to be happy, and you're so sad because my husband made you sad.
Well, the way I look at it is, if someone comes to my house and says, we want to get married, we want premarital counsel, well, the counsel I'm going to give them is, don't get married. That's generally basically what I'm going to tell them. And one reason why is because whenever I've done that is because I really think they shouldn't get married. I think it's a bad idea from my perspective, which is what they're asking for. So I tell them. The other reason
So you're talking about everybody who comes to you for premarital, you think they shouldn't get married?
No, not everybody. I'm talking about the cases where they've come and generally I've told them don't get married. Okay. I'm saying if I tell someone don't get married, if I do tell them that,
because you think
it's because I really do think they shouldn't.
Married.
I'm not just like just saying that to be mean. Okay. I honestly think they probably shouldn't get married.
Right.
But then there's also a very small part.
There's very serious things they need to work out before they get married.
Well, if I tell them don't get married, it's because you can just take that to the bank.
No, I don't know about that.
Anyways, and then in a very minor way, it's certainly not the driving force. But I also think if I tell them don't get married and they don't get married, they shouldn't have gotten married. I mean, who am I? So
Right.
if me telling them, hey, that's a bad idea, don't do that, and they're like, oh, let's not do that then. Well, then they're looking for someone to just
tell them.
Yeah, they're looking for someone to pull them back from the edge of the cliff.
Right.
Right. And so sometimes I'll just tell people, I don't think you should get married, even when it's not because I don't think they should. I don't think they should at the time. And if I think that, and if I look and see in either the man or the woman's eyes like this, please help me look.
Right.
Then I put that out there, and then they're like, well, Michael said we shouldn't do it. And they don't. Well, then I've pulled them off the cliff. So that's kind of the thing. Anyways. But no, I think that having those conversations before you get married is very important. We didn't really have a lot of that. We did some. I mean, our conversations were what we had in letters.
Premarital counseling at
No,
all.
but we did discuss
we did.
that kind of thing more. And
We
I was
did.
very doctrinally minded, even at that age.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I cared a lot about doctrine and
Right. And that was never an issue for me. I think in our early years, the issue was on raising kids, on raising babies.
I was going to get to that.
Yeah.
So one of the values that are very important to share for a marriage to be successful, I think, is raising kids. How are you going to raise your kids? And I think that we pretty much agreed on it in principle. I think how we implemented those principles
was very different. Yeah.
And I think that, speaking for myself, I was perfect in every way, and you needed no.
We all know that. Yeah.
No, I know that I would definitely go back and do things differently if I had the opportunity to go back and raise my kids again. I would do it very differently than how I did, especially starting out. But
Well, one thing I think that what when I look back on those early years, and it was probably mainly with Cole, a little bit Cole and Nolan, that yes, you were strict, yes, very strict, much more that, and I wish if I could go back, I would been a lot more opinionated and a lot more assertive with what I felt. Again, I didn't feel the liberty to, and that's my fault. But what you did do, though, was never, ever, ever did a day go by that you were not affectionate to them, that contrary to what people might think and how you looked in public, I knew you, and the kids did, and they knew how much affection you gave them, and how every single day you told them that you loved them and cuddled with them, and just So I think it's important to be said that it wasn't all discipline. It wasn't all that way. I don't think the boys thought for a second that you were only about discipline.
oh, I hope so. But I mean, but we did share that. I mean, we did agree that we agreed on spanking for the most part, as far as in principle. We agreed on discipline. We agreed on who's running the asylum. Is it the inmates or the staff? And we agreed that the parents are running the asylum,
Right,
not the
of
inmates.
course, yes.
And I mean, we didn't have any disagreement
No,
on that. It was
no.
just only disagreement we had was on implementation, and that was a lot of that is inexperience and youthful zeal
Yeah.
on my part, and that's one problem with having kids when you're very young,
Yes.
right? You have too
Yes.
much energy,
Yes.
and the problem with having kids when you're old is you don't have enough energy.
And you always think you're right when
Right.
you're young.
Oh yes,
You're always right. I'm right.
and
The old people are wrong.
right. And in a way, many times they are. I mean, I think if grandparents raised kids,
Oh,
it
no,
would be
it's a whole
horrible.
other problem.
Oh, it'd be horrible.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, because they're not made to raise
Whole-
kids.
No.
So, there is to me I've always told parents.
agree.
I've always told parents that they need to treat their kids like they're made of rubber, and obviously within reason.
Right,
And
right.
I'm not there. There's it has to be within reason. But
Yeah, 'cause kids
I
are
believe
resilient.
the kids are extremely resilient. I believe they've been designed by God to be able to resist, right, bad parenting. Not terrible, not
No,
catastrophic parenting,
course.
not
Not
demonic parenting,
Yes.
but just sincere, loving, bad parenting.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think kids are designed by God to bounce back from that.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, I'm not speaking of abuse, and I'm not speaking made of rubber physically, and you can beat them up and
Mm-hmm.
they'll heal. I don't mean that. I just mean kids have an ability to withstand
Oh, yeah.
loving and
And
sincere.
even kids that are
bad
abused
parents.
defend and love their parents.
Yeah, it is amazing.
It is.
I mean, it shows you, even though that's not to be used ever as a justification for
course
abuse,
not.
but it does prove my point that even in the most extreme cases, you find that same resilience. Although it messes up kids.
Yes, it does.
And parents, on one side we can't beat ourselves up for being bad parents if we're sincere and we really were doing it, trying to do the best for our kids, which is a point that there's times when Christian fundamentalists, and I speak to them because that's what I know. I'm not saying that them as opposed to all other people on earth.
Yes.
So I'm sure there's plenty of groups, of religious groups and non-religious groups that do the same thing. I just don't know. I know that Christian fundamentalists have a tendency, because I did, to be raising kids for themselves and for everyone else, and not for the children. Many times. I'm not saying all the time, every time. Many times, overzealous Christian parents, especially fathers, their decisions are based on wanting to create the child that makes them look good, that makes their church look good,
Right.
that makes their ministry look good.
Right.
That's what they're trying to do. They want to create this child that speaks well of everything
Do you
except
think that's
the child.
why pastors' kids are notoriously kind of messed up.
I don't know that that is a accurate stereotype. I don't know. I think it's because I think that no data has ever been done on this that I'm aware of. So it's all anecdotal, and anecdotal data is terrible data. It is completely worthless data from any statistical standpoint. And so to try to make any assessment or judgment on a group of people based on anecdotal, stereotypical data is very dangerous. I think that in that case, speaking of that, is that if you look at a church of, say, 200 people, there's only 4 kids that stand out in that church, most likely. Let's say there's 8. 4 of the 8 are the pastor's kids because of who they are. So everything they see, that's under a magnifying glass.
True. Yeah.
Everyone sees it. Everyone knows who they are. If those kids misbehave, everyone knows they did it and who they are, right? And so even if they're not terrible kids, that's who you're looking at.
Magnified.
Right, that's who you're looking at all the
Yes.
time. It's all the time they did it, right? And all the other kids, they get that no one's looking at them. So then that data doesn't mean anything, right? Because they're under the microscope.
That's true.
And so I'm not convinced that pastors' kids are any worse than any other kids. I just am not. And before anyone were to make that, make any type of serious case about that or try to extrapolate any serious conclusion from that, I would want to see actual data, like real statistical data showing that that's the case. I would almost bet money that it's the opposite. That pastors' kids statistically are better kids than the average Christian child, Christian kids. That would be my guess. But there's no data. I don't have any information.
No.
That's just my from my perspective. I would guess that that's the way it is. Yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
but there is a problem in that. That is problematic, and I think it's really bad. And I think it's something that all Christians who have children or raising children really need to be aware of. Don't raise your kids to make it so that you as like this like a
Reflection.
sculpture, right? Like this sculpture for your faith,
Right.
right? It's like an art exhibition
Well,
of
when
your
you
faith.
do, and you put that much faith in how you raise your kids and your high expectations on them, because parents do that.
Oh, yes.
It's devastating
Yeah.
if they do not fulfill your expectations, and it's very probable that they don't.
Yeah, and then those kids are raised with a unrealistic expectation on what they're going to be, how they're going to live, and even it goes beyond just righteous living or Christian value living. It's down to ministry value. So it's my dad was a preacher. Everyone expects me to be a preacher. My dad was my mom and dad were missionaries. I'm expected to be a missionary, and I think that there's a lot of kids that are raised, even if it's not intentionally, but they're raised with that cloud over them, that pressure all the time to match up, right? To be whatever it is the parents were, and it's hard then for them to become their own person, even more so than it already is for a child to step out of the shadow of their parents and be their own person. And just that adds to it. And there's part of that, like I say, that's normal, natural, and you're not going to get away from it. Almost all children have a very hard time coming out from underneath the shadow of their parents, financially, career-wise. They always, I remember my dad was telling me, my dad told me that he was like, I don't remember what age he said he was, maybe older than 35 before he felt that he had actually equaled his dad. But here's the thing, this is what's so crazy. My dad bought his first car when he was 16 in cash, new. I think it was new, but good car, better car than his dad had. Bought it in cash. He rented his first farm when he was like 16 or 17 to farm his own farm. When he was still living at home, he went and made a deal and rented a farm and started building his own little farming empire when he's like 17.
So very accomplished at a young
Extremely
age.
accomplished. He had his own business building houses when he was in high school. He would go and build houses as his own business, building other people's houses from the ground up, pouring the concrete, building the houses when he's in high school. That was his shop class. They let him leave school and build houses as credit to shop class. So he was extremely accomplished. And then when he, once he got out of high school, he was he was making tons of money, ridiculous sums of money doing construction and running a business. And his father wasn't nearly as accomplished in those ways. I mean, my granddad was he was a very very, very good man in many ways. But as far as like business and money and stuff, my dad was always far, far better at it than his dad was. And yet he never felt that way. He always felt that he was always being judged by, and I don't know that was true, but he always felt that he was live up to the standard of his dad, even though, as far as I can tell, from the time he was 17, he was already had surpassed him in any way that he was measuring by at the time. Mm-hmm. And he was involved in youth ministry and all kinds of other things.
Right.
So he wasn't just doing that. I mean, he was. It's just very interesting. So kids just have that natural problem, most kids do, of doing that. And then when parents are trying to create the masterpiece sculpture to honor their own existence in their kids, or trying to sculpt their kids so that everyone will look at their kids and go, wow, that was a great parent. This is a wonderful faith. They're trying to make a kid that will speak positively about everything they care about.
Right.
And they're not really thinking, is this the best thing for my
them.
child?
Yes.
Well,
regardless of how it makes me look.
I surpassed you a long time ago.
In weight, yeah.
That was hilarious. That was super funny. I'm going to move on.
I'm going to move on.
You're going to mute that again, he said. So.
Well, and I don't think that men or boys in particular can ever get away from that unless they get, it's possible, but unless they get married. So I would say females can get away with not getting married, deciding I'm going to be single, because they are naturally are not averse to growing up and providing for themselves and working hard and moving up in their careers, making their own nest with or without kids. It's very important to have the home and just everything more structured, because that's how women are built. We're nurturers, even if we nurture ourselves. We want that place. We want our own little community that we build for ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. Men in general, boys, kind of remain boys. They don't have that unless they have something driving them to be better for, something driving them, and usually it's their testosterone, right? It's their sex drive that makes them want to be better for a female. That's what, I don't know, I guess psychologists will tell you that they're driven by that. It's to impress. They need somebody to impress. And so if they don't have a woman to do that, or a family, or to raise kids, or to build something, then all you have is, yourself, and you end up still kind of being that boy man. Yes,
the man child.
The man child living in a pop-up trailer somewhere in, some park, and you're kind of scared of them. You tell your kids not to walk in front of their house because they're these weird men that live alone. And maybe that's stereotypical, and that's not all men, but generally speaking, they remain children because they are not driven to work for somebody so that they can gain the respect of their spouse and their kids, right? And you're just never you're never out of the shadow maybe of your parents. And so I would push young men to find that woman as soon as possible, after.
What do you mean by as soon as possible?
Okay.
Because that's a very subjective term.
I
so
know.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, as soon as you figure out what you want to do with your life.
Well, but see that, do you understand the paradox then of what you're saying? You're saying men aren't able to figure out what they really want to do with life without a woman, and yet they shouldn't marry a woman until they know what they want to do with their
Yeah,
life.
so they need to ask a woman. No. No, I mean, man, I think a lot of boys, they go to college, they're single, they do all that, but women, single women tend to make more than single men.
No, I agree with
in
you
the
saying.
workplace.
Yes.
So they once they get into the workplace or whatever it is they want to do, start thinking about setting roots somewhere. So I guess that's what I mean. I'm not trying to put a timeline. I'm not saying after high school. I'm not saying right after college. I really don't know. That's for every individual. But they need to start thinking about setting up their roots and starting a life with somebody and sharing that part of their life with somebody else.
I agree that, and I think it's proven out by the data, and it's pretty obvious and self-evident that boys do not become men, typically speaking, without getting married.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't. I mean, it's anecdotal, but I've known a lot of grown men that are very old and they're just big kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most men do not have an adversity to being little boys.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really bother. They're okay with that.
Yeah.
Until it causes them a problem, excuse me.
Right.
Which is what happens in marriage. Once you get married, and it's like, okay, now things are serious. I got people depending on me. And men respond well to responsibility.
Yes, they do. That's exactly right.
When men are given responsibility, even from the time they're little boys, you give them
Yes.
responsibility, they respond very positively
Right.
to responsibility.
Exactly.
Which I think is a big cause of why.
Especially when they receive praise for it.
Yes, when there's reward
When there's
associated
reward.
with it. Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's a big problem with our society today, that we're not putting any responsibility on the youth. It's like, in fact, it's considered child abuse if you have your kids out. I mean, what I did with my kids, it was illegal.
What's that?
Taking them to
to
construction jobs to go work when they were,
Even though we were teenagers?
yeah. They aren't allowed on. It's very limited. The federal government has very strict guidelines on what kids can actually do. So like when my kids were little, when they were 7, well, I wouldn't let them use the power saw because I didn't want them to cut off a finger. When they were 15, I didn't let them use. I wouldn't let them use the power saws until they were adults, practically, because I didn't want
I
them.
don't think you would let Cole use the power saw.
I still wouldn't let Cole use the power saw.
That is extremely dangerous.
That's very dangerous. Cole cannot use any spinning equipment because he will immediately cut his finger off.
You will.
So, no, I wouldn't. I didn't want them to hurt themselves in any way that would be permanent, right? Which is why I regret letting them play football. I really do. That was a terrible decision. I didn't think about it then. I should have never let them play football. I would, if I was,
glad you did.
huh?
I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
What?
I have mixed
Show us the
feelings.
short arm.
No,
Show us the
Anyway.
short arm.
that is not.
Show
for-
us the T-Rex arm.
I have
It
mixed
gets
feelings
censored.
about that. Because I like organized
Show us the arm.
sports.
Go on, put the arms out. Show
Let's
us.
See if we can see it.
See if you can see it. See? Can you see the two arms? One's shorter. Look how much shorter that arm is. That's from football. He has a little miniature arm. He has a mini-me arm. On one side, he's like a little T-Rex. It's terrible
I
because he
know.
broke his
It is,
wrist
yes,
in
it's
football.
terrible. Yeah.
And Cole got a concussion and broke his collarbone. It's like, why? And for what? For what gain? They could have gotten the experience of football with soccer, with volleyball, with anything else.
I don't think so.
Really? Why
I
is that?
did both sports. Football was much funner. I was better at football. I think most boys need football in some aspects.
Some kind of an aggressive
Yeah.
sport.
How is that? What do you
Not
mean
all
they need it?
boys.
Because you
I
realize that only one
love-
country in the world plays football.
Yeah, I know.
So then what about all those other boys?
They're adding it to basically every country now.
No.
Yes.
They're
You go to
adding-
Mexico.
there's
There's
some
other,
When I was in
people.
there's other
Mexico,
sports. There's
there was a
rugby and all of
handful.
those type of.
Very few people play that
hands-on kind
compared
of
to soccer.
sports.
Soccer is the biggest sport
And
in
you
the
know
world.
what soccer teaches you? To roll
Well,
around in the dirt
and
pretend
cry
you're
like a
hurt.
baby girl.
Exactly.
Yes.
You know, football
hate
teaches
soccer.
boys don't cry. They hit.
Well,
and
I'm
you
not
get
sure
right
that's
back
even a
up.
better one.
It did. When I hurt my wrist, my coach put me on the next play.
then we're gonna go find him right now. When we get done with the podcast, we're gonna look him up and show him. See this? See this? See the short arm? That's what you did.
I don't know. The football and soccer never taught me how to be tough. I think football did.
You
You're
didn't
outside
have
in
a
the middle
problem
of
being
summer.
tough.
No, not normally.
Because I
but
taught you that by having
Yeah,
to
but
carry
not everybody
mirrors
has
up
a
the
father.
stairs.
That
Not
is
everyone
true.
has
Yeah.
you're raised that way, you know, and so sometimes boys need an outlet,
Yeah.
and that's what organized sports does.
I'm not against organized sports.
Yeah.
Football is a sport that, in my opinion, everybody who plays it gets hurt. It's like a motorcycle. Everyone who rides a motorcycle
Yes, I agree.
gets in a wreck.
I do. I agree.
There is almost
yeah.
nobody who rides a motorcycle that has not had a wreck. And when you have a wreck on a motorcycle, it's like catastrophic, right? Same way with football. Everyone who plays football, concussions. And now we're starting to see CTE, what happens from these concussions. This isn't just like, oh, shake it off, you'll be fine. This actually causes long-term dementia and violence.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
now we're starting to see, well, maybe a lot of the violence we're seeing amongst some of these young men
professional
is attributed,
athletes,
not
yeah.
even just, this doesn't just happen with professionals. Professionals have less concussions than
college.
college. And college has less than high school. High school has less than junior high. The younger they are, the more concussions there are. I did the research on this. So the data is buried. And NFL does not want people to know this. One is because they have deep pockets, and so people are going to sue the NFL for their high schooler getting concussions because they're going to say they're pushing it. Because the NFL really does kind of push these varsity sports and junior varsity sports because that's their pool. That's where they're getting their talent from. It's a really big problem if parents start saying our kids aren't going to play football. The NFL's in big trouble because then the talent pool is going to start going to other sports.
Right.
And that's going to really hurt them. So, but the data that's being buried is you would think, well, the younger kids, they don't really get hurt as much. Actually, it's the opposite. The professional players get hurt a lot less often than the non-professional. And the younger they are, the more likely they are to get hurt. In football,
Yeah.
this doesn't bear out in other sports nearly to the degree. Tennis, soccer, wrestling even is not as judo, jiu-jitsu. These are not as dangerous as playing football. Not as dangerous.
Yeah.
I just think it was
Right.
in my opinion, from my perspective, and you're all wrong, is that football, letting my boys play football was a huge mistake.
Okay.
Huge mistake. And anyway, but I wish my point I was getting back to is I was much more careful with them taking them to construction sites. I did not want them to be permanently hurt. Right.
Exactly.
So I wouldn't let them use power tools and
Yeah.
stuff. But according to the law, they couldn't even use a cordless drill or a cordless impact
I've only
driver.
had one person ever not let me when I was young.
Yeah,
use
that
something.
one-
Yeah,
that
that
one-
one person. He didn't
that-
want me using something that. No, if it
You
was
couldn't u-
corded. If it was corded, I couldn't use it, and we had something that was corded that day, and I couldn't use it. I could use an impact, but.
And that's
anything
probably out of
high-powered-
the idea of electrocution
Yeah.
is probably what his view was there.
Yeah.
But you're actually not supposed to use like power tools. If you're like a 17-year-old or 16-year-old working on a job site, you basically can carry things and sweep, and you can't actually use tools legally. I never did that. But I wouldn't let them use tools that could hurt them permanently. Like if you drill your finger with a drill, it's really not a permanent damage for usually. I mean, any more than a box knife could be permanent. But no, I think that kids need to be brought up with more responsibility, and now that's looked on as being like child abuse. And so if you have your kids, give them these type of responsibilities where they're actually doing something meaningful in life. And I paid my kids. See, when I grew up, little man, I worked harder than you ever did.
Much younger.
Much younger. I was setting third-floor roof trusses when I was 12. Me and my dad. So my dad had other people on the crew, and they were too afraid to get up on the third floor plate on apartment buildings because we're setting the roof trusses. So
Yeah.
the only thing to walk on is a 3.5-inch board, three stories up. and you're walking on a 3.5-inch 2x4. And so I was the only one that was willing to do it. And I hate heights, but I was more afraid of my dad than I was of the falling off the 3rd floor building. So I would get up there, and then we would carry these roof trusses, right? And I was 12 at the time, and that was in San Antonio in the heat and working all day. I didn't get any special breaks. You're not supposed to do that with kids. That's all highly, highly, highly illegal. I'm going to report him. So, no, I mean, I'm not advocating that either. I think that's a little much. But anyways, my point was I did that, and I didn't even get paid, not a penny. I never got paid a penny for that. And I remember I wanted a better tape measure.
Your kids got rich over there.
My kids got rich. Of course, I looked at them like, this is a great way for me to be able to give my kids a lot of money, because if you look at the tax benefits of it, there's tremendous tax benefit. You're a sole proprietorship, which is why I kept my business as a sole proprietorship, because there's tremendous tax benefits. And being a sole proprietorship, you're able to pay your kids without having to pay FICA. They don't have to pay income tax up to a certain amount.
Yeah.
And so I was able to give them, I paid them like $20 an hour when they were 15 to work for me. And
well, they kept 10, and that showed us that it allowed us to teach them about money and about savings.
Yes.
So then they saved the other part where
10 I put in the bank.
Paid when he started driving. He didn't actually have a vehicle till he was 18, right when he turned 18.
That's
and
mostly his fault. Because
yes, it was his fault. Yes,
he wouldn't do.
He didn't want to do driver's
test.
ed.
He wanted to drive so badly, but too lazy to go online and do his stupid driver's training.
Yeah.
Guys are dark.
That's cool. That's cool. However, I was going to compliment him. Because of that, he paid for his whole year of car insurance and the whole year of gas money.
Yes.
So he didn't have to. He went wherever he wanted. All his gas was already paid. His whole first year of insurance was already paid.
Well, he worked for me for a year and bought a BMW.
And he did.
That is true.
Yeah.
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 It took only 1 year. I bought a BMW, and when I went to school, I had enough money to pay for gas. I never asked for gas money.
No.
Ever.
Never.
And I had enough money to go out to eat. I mean, I got breakfast tacos every single morning. I went all kinds of places and never once asked for money. And that was all from one summer of work. And then I worked the 2 weeks in Christmas and the 1 week during Thanksgiving, and not even every day of those weeks.
Yeah. Well, it's your business. Even though you don't like it, it has allowed us all these opportunities to.
Yeah. But see, and then what we did is we took, just so people understand, what we did is I paid them $20 an hour is what they got paid. But 10 they didn't have access to. That money went into their account. We set up an account for them, and that went into their account. So half the money they made, they saved. And then the other half they could save and spend and give out of that. So they didn't get any access to that half. That wasn't really their savings.
Right.
That was like their retirement, if you will, kind of a fund. And they got to then take 10 an hour, and from that half of what I paid them, and I paid them all the same. I paid them all. Even Kirsten got paid 20 an hour. And then the 10, they were supposed to save something out of that. Nolan was the only one that actually did it. Nolan and Kirsten did it, I guess. Cole wouldn't save a penny. He was not a saver.
Go to a barbecue place and order 50 pounds of meat.
It was horrible. I was with him.
He got our savings.
Yeah, he got my money
he
management skills.
He got it
Definitely,
honest
he
from
got it
both of
really
us.
honest.
We're both free spirits when it comes to
So
money.
yeah, we went to that barbecue place, and he's ordering and ordering and ordering and ordering, and the barbecue guy finally said, "Son, you've had enough." He ordered so much that the barbecue guy don't cut him off. Like if he was a drunk, he cut him off.
It's good. You're taking a 16-year-old to a place that you order by the pound, and you say one isn't a lot, and half is half of one. Yes. So then you're like, give me a pound of that, give me half a pound of that, give me a
Sounds
quarter
like a
pound of
little
that,
bit.
have 1 pound of that.
Yeah, I'll take a couple links there, and the barbecue guy was like, "Son, you've had enough." He just handed him the tray and said, "I'm not giving you anything else. That's all you're getting."
A $50 thing. And then Cole felt so sick spending $50 on barbecue.
He didn't even eat it. Oh, it was terrible. I felt so bad for him, but he had to pay. I wasn't paying for him like that. You did that.
You did that.
It's all you, bro.
Anna says I'm wearing a cool T-shirt. It's my Chosen T-shirt.
Yeah.
Got
that
my
is a
new
cool
Chosen
t-shirt.
T-shirt. If you haven't watched the show The Chosen, go watch it. Great show.
So you have your Chosen, and I have my Leftist Tears.
Yeah, this is about Jesus.
This is about the Daily Wire and political
Yeah, this is about Jesus.
greatness.
You should explain your last shirt from your last podcast.
Oh
Nobody
yeah,
actually
everyone's
saw it.
yeah. The last shirt, if you watched the last podcast and you
With
weren't
Bill.
sure with Bill, yeah, the one with Bill, and it says straight out of church is what it says, straight out of church instead of straight out of Compton. I won't wear that on the podcast anymore because you can't see the bottom, so it looks like I'm talking about straight out of Compton. Anyways, Nolan pointed that out last time. I'm sure it offended all the right people. But yeah, it does that. You just
Okay.
gotta ignore
I thought
that.
I did something.
No, that's in every podcast.
Yes, we
is
have
that
to talk about it now. It's a tradition.
It's a
Once
tradition.
the thing beeps, we gotta say that's the recorder.
it's the recorder, the sound
Okay.
recorder. When it fills up to a certain point, it beeps, and then I wish there's no way to disable it. It's terrible.
Okay.
I hate that thing. Anyway, love their little recorder, but that's a pain. Anyway, yeah. So with going back to what we're talking about with our marriage, what we had our value system on children. I think we were simpatico on it,
Yes.
and our disagreements on it were very minor compared to what some marriages have. And if you disagree fundamentally on how to raise kids, well, that's going to make marriage just terrible, horrible.
Yeah.
We agreed that kids were gonna, I know marriages where they don't agree whether or not kids are gonna even do chores, right? Whether they're gonna wash dishes or not,
Right.
or clean their own
Or
room,
have a job when they turn 16.
or have a job. Yeah, any of these things like that.
Right.
And I'm not advocating at this moment either way.
Yeah.
The point is the disagreement between the spouse that they wouldn't agree on these things. This goes beyond, are we going to spank our children? That's a point you need to know. I'm not saying you have to spank them
All the ins
or not
and
spank
outs
them.
and-
One or the other.
Yeah.
But you need to both wholeheartedly agree on that.
Right.
See, I think that not agreeing is going to be worse for your children and far worse for your marriage
Yeah.
than agreeing on something I don't agree with. So if a husband and wife agree on not spanking their child, even if I disagree with their view, I think that's better for them than for one of them to agree with me and not agree with their spouse. Don't agree with me. Agree with your spouse, right? You're not married to me. You need to agree with your spouse.
Exactly.
I think you make it a little. That's not simple. Not agreeing with you. You make it very hard for people not to agree with you.
How's that?
Cause I don't know. He's like over people, and you say you shouldn't do that, and then I go, yeah, Anna, we shouldn't do that. But Dad just told me not to do something.
Nolan.
Shouldn't do it. Stop it, devil.
Get thee behind me, Satan. So, no, I mean, you really need to have agreement on these fundamental ideas. And I think that's like raising children is one of those fundamental things, how you're going to discipline them. I think money is a fundamental issue.
Yes.
It's like, on all the studies, it's the number one cause for marital strife is money. I think they're a mistake. I don't think it's true.
Well, here's what's interesting too is that you and I are very, very, very different. And yet at the same time, we just agreed on all of these. I don't know if it's the Lord just put us together that way. I don't know.
It's because we came from the same church.
Well, but I wasn't taught anything about money. However, we
No,
were
we
both
were.
very generous. So
We
my
were. We were
parents
taught giving.
Extremely generous and extremely hospitable. You came from the same. That's true because you came from the same type of.
We came from the
upbringing.
same church. We were taught giving. We were taught generosity. We were taught that money is not, that money is, I think, a little too far to the extreme, but that money is not the thing that we should care about. It's more than that, that we should actually not actively not care about money. I mean, that was the teaching. I think they went a little far on that, but that's fine. It's not a criticism. I just think that it should be dialed back just a hair on that. I just want to make that clear. But the value system I agree with that we had from that church. And because we went to the same church, we had the same shared value system. Even on the things we didn't agree on the details of, we
Exactly.
agreed on the underlying principle. We
Yes.
agreed that the Bible was inerrant. We agreed that the Bible was was the word of God, that it was the rule of faith and life. These are all things we agreed on.
And it trumped my feelings and your feelings.
That's right.
It didn't matter what we thought. It's what is the Bible? How should we conduct ourselves?
To paraphrase your demigod, scriptures don't care about your feelings.
Yes. The facts don't care about your feelings.
Was that Ben Shapiro?
Yeah.
Yes, that's her little demigod.
Oh my goodness.
That's how he
Yeah, I
talks.
know his voice is annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He sounds
actually, like Michael knows better now.
he sounds like a beaver on cocaine or something.
It's funny. Yeah, he's hard to listen
Yeah,
to.
that's
for too long.
that's the one thing I don't like about
It's
him.
his
Is
voice.
his voice.
Yeah.
But
And
that
I
was
hate-
also the problem with that presidential candidate. He was the governor from somewhere. What was his?
I don't know.
It was when Trump was running.
I don't know which one. There's a lot of them.
No, there was the one with the terrible voice.
Oh, Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz.
Ted
Oh,
Cruz.
poor
He has
guy.
a whiny little voice too.
Yeah, I think
Right.
that lost him the election. I had to. I wouldn't vote for him because of that. I was like, I can't have a president with a.
What lost him the election, I think, was him going down with Glenn Beck, passing out teddy bears to all the illegal aliens that were in detention centers.
Is that what he did?
Yes, that's what he
Okay,
did.
that's another subject.
It doesn't matter whether you agree or not. That was the demographic he was competing for. He was running against Trump in the primary. Trump was out there saying, we're going to build a big wall and we're not going to let him in. And Ted Cruz is down passing out teddy bears with Glenn Beck crying. Glenn Beck is a little crybaby. And he's out there passing out teddy bears. And it's like,
Suck it up.
he's like, you made that. He tried to say, this is where I'm going to make the distinction between us. And people who voted for Trump in the primary wanted tougher immigration. They did not want passing out teddy bears to illegal aliens. I'm not even making a value judgment on who was right. I'm just saying, in that election, that was the issue, especially for the primary voters.
Right.
It was actually the issue for all voters, as it turned out, but we knew it was the issue on that. It was a terrible miscalculation, politically speaking. But he wanted to differentiate himself from Trump, so he wanted to be the caring person who was going to enforce immigration but not be unfeeling about it. And people weren't having it at that time.
Right.
Terrible miscalculation. I think that's what cost him.
You think so?
That, and because he wasn't American. He's Canadian. He was born in Canada. So then there was enough, I think there was enough people in the primary GOP base who were saying, now wait a minute, we just had years of this whole Obama as a Kenyan. I'm not saying he was, but that was the birther movement, right? They're all saying, well, he was born in Kenya, therefore he's disqualified from being president. Now, I don't think any of that held water. I don't think any of that's true. I know Brett's going to be on in a minute telling me how I'm wrong because he's really into that conspiracy theory. But the point is, you can't think that Obama's disqualified because he was born from an American mom in Kenya and say that disqualifies him, and not say that Cruz, we know he was born in Canada. He has a Canadian
Why did you bring up
birth
Ted Cruz?
certificate.
Well, I'm about to make it worse. Now that we're on the subject.
Okay.
Well, what would you say the problem with Ben Carson? Because I like Ben Carson.
Ben Carson's problem is that he got, and I don't know this as a fact. This is just my read on it from when I was watching it, because I liked him. I really liked him a lot.
Yeah, I like Ben Carson too.
I really did. But my read on it is he picked up some steam in the primaries. He really did. He was one or two. I think he was first or second for a little short time, because he came out with these bold views, bold ideas that were completely outside the box. Like on minimum wage is a great example where he came out and said, what we need to do is have a multi-tier minimum wage system, which is a bold statement. That was a really innovative idea. And that's just an example. He had a lot of these things where he was completely looking at it as a non-politician. When he picked up steam, he hired in the consultants, I think. They came in and they said, and they started showing him the data, showing him the poll, the focus groups studies, and then he started just talking like a politician. So then he started, just everything he said after that.
Politician.
Well, it doesn't matter. He could be a great one, but there's 15 other ones. So if you're going to hire a politician, why would you hire one who only sounds like one but has never been one? He sounded just like a normal politician, but he never actually done it. So if you're going to hire someone who's saying the same thing as everyone else, well, then you're going to hire the guy that's already done it for a long time. So then you're going to get Jeb Bush, and then that's when the lead went to those guys. The lead went over to normal. It was them between normal politicians and Trump. That's what I think happened. I think the consultants ruined him. I think if he would have just stuck to being the maverick like Trump did. See, Trump never polished himself according to consultants. He stuck to whatever crazy thing was coming in his head. That's what he was saying, right? And people wanted that. If Carson would have done that, he would have been a competitor. He could have been a contender.
Could have.
Could have been a contender.
He messed up.
But anyways, going back to what I was saying, so it's these shared values that people need to look at in marriage. They have to share these fundamental values like faith and religion. That's critical.
Yeah.
Critical. And this is why Christians have to look for spouses in their church. And by their church, I mean their actual congregation or congregations that are very like-minded. It's not enough to say, well, they're a Christian. It just isn't enough. They need to be like-minded on these fundamental things. And you don't have to look at it. One of the problems I think with Christians, with Christianity and Christian churches on this issue, is that they've made it a thing like it's this magical spiritual, obedience to God that you do it. It's like if you find a spouse outside of Christianity, you've committed a sin against God. And that may be true. I'm not even arguing the point necessarily. Let's just stipulate that that's true. It's also not the way to explain it to people. That type of explanation, in my opinion, does not go very far, especially in our day and age. Mm-hmm. And I know that's going to offend all the right people when I say that, and that's good. But it doesn't go very far. I believe that Christianity is in a dire need of having things explained to people in ways that make sense also. Yeah. Not either or. Yeah. You can say that the Bible prohibits marrying outside of the faith. Right? It says, be not unequally yoked with unbelievers. Mm-hmm. Now, I have a different view on most of these scriptures, most of the text of the scripture, in that I don't believe that even that is like this commandment, like the 10 Commandments. I know there's going to be a lot of people going to disagree with that, and that's fine. And I could be wrong. It's unlikely. I mean, I haven't been wrong yet. So
right.
Statistically,
of course, we all know that.
Yeah, yes. Statistically, I'm, I would bet on myself.
You are.
Thank you.
You're always right, baby.
Yeah, she's lying. She's a
Try
lying
not to be
13.
gross, guys. Come on.
When we get done, I'm going to give her a kiss right here and on there.
No.
I'm going to leave before it's over then.
You're gonna mess this up.
Take off.
Can't mess this up. So you have the 10 Commandments, and these are like, these are the commandments, these are the laws you have to keep. If you don't do them, it's sin. And then you have the New Testament, and a lot of things I think that we think of as commandments in the New Testament aren't commandments. It's advice.
So what about the fornication?
Well, I think fornication is sin. I'm not saying there are no commandments in the New Testament. I'm saying a lot of the things we take as commandments in that same way as like the 10 Commandments type idea, I don't think they're that way. I think it's advice. I think it's saying this is going to give you a better life. Let's assume. I will, for sake of argument, say everything that anyone wants to call a commandment in the New Testament is a strict commandment. It's not how it should be taught,
right?
Especially not exclusively. It should be taught as explaining, because this is why especially the epistles, they give many times they give this quote unquote commandment, and they give it with a tremendous amount of intellectual background to it. It's not just like the 10 Commandments were like do, don't. Don't wear. Where's the explanation on why Jews can't wear cotton and polyester mixed? Mm-hmm. I find no explanation for it. I can come up with in my mind reasons why that would be important, but it's not actually in the text, not very clear. You have to really stretch to make the case, an intellectual case, on why God would care whether or not you have linen and flax or whatever it was, linen and whatever, linen and wool mixed in the same garment. So the law says that if you have a cotton shirt, it has to be 100% cotton.
Right.
Can't be mixed. Well, you can go
you can take that and use it as not being unequally yoked. The two don't go.
Well,
they
that would be
don't
the
blend.
symbolical view from the New. But in the Old Testament, the reason why I could make a case intellectually for that is because God wanted to separate the Jewish nation culturally from all
everything
other
else.
people in order to give them something to preserve their culture by, preserve their identity by, right? So the idea, the purpose of a culture is to preserve identity. That's what culture is for. That's why when you lose people say, we want to have diversity of culture, which means when they mean that today, they don't actually mean they want diversity. It means they want to amalgamate it all. They want to mix it all together and turn it into gray. They don't want blue and red and pink and green and all these different colors of culture.
No, they want one big giant think tank.
One big giant amalgamated, mushy, gray, brown, whatever, non-culture. That's what they're wanting, right? And but at the same time, they're wanting identities. They're wanting to all these different identities, which is what supposedly this LGBTQ whatever movement is about everyone having their identity, and you can't make me conform to any other identity. But the only way to maintain identity is through culture. Identity is always under assault, because cooperation requires a certain amount of agreement and of standardization, right? So if you have a tape measure that's in inches, and he has one that's in centimeters, and I have one that's in cubits, well, we can't cooperate together very easily on building something, on, let's say, a construction project, because we don't have any standardized measurement to go by, right? You have your centimeter culture, he has his imperial culture, and I have my cubit culture. And because we have three separate cultures, it makes our identities unable to combine easily. It's very hard to combine them. We have to have some translation mechanism between us, right, to combine the cultures. And as long as you maintain that culture, you maintain a separate identity, which is where the U.S. is. So the whole world has gone metric. The whole world uses a metric measuring system. The U.S. continues with feet, miles, and inches. Well, that just makes the U.S., that's one of the things that maintains the U.S. Having a unique identity. It's not the only thing. It's not even the biggest thing, but it's an example of this. When you look at Europe and you go to the European countries, European states, that's like going from Alabama to Georgia. They have different languages, and that's about it. Everything else, it is identical. There's very little difference between going from Germany to France to Austria to any of these countries like that in the European Union. It's like you're just traveling between Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana. Very little differences, really, right? You come to the U.S. from anywhere in the world, and it's like radically different. The United States has a very unique identity. And what safeguards that unique identity for any person or any group of people is the culture. When you sacrifice your culture, you are killing your identity. That's what you're doing. And so when you look at churches, you have to realize that as a church gives you a certain culture, which maintains your identity. And so that's where I see the Old Testament comes in. So the Old Testament prescribes to the Jews certain things of how they dress, what kind of foods they can eat. And people are like, oh, well, there was these health benefits in not eating pork. And it's like, yeah, whatever. That is not the intellectual reasoning behind this. And it certainly isn't a spiritual The reason why God doesn't want you to eat pigs isn't because there's something unholy about eating a pig as compared to eating a horse or a cow or a dog or a bat. None of that this is not a spiritual thing. Christ made that clear. He said, whatever you put in your mouth goes into the latrine. That is not changing anything spiritually. The reason why God would put these rules on these things, the only intellectual reason I can figure out, is because he wanted to differentiate the Jewish people, Israel, from the rest of the world culturally. Give them a unique identity. The only way to maintain identity is to maintain a unique culture. That is a safeguard That's the walls around the city of identity. And so then they have all these crazy ideas. And Jews, the way they dress, and they got their little thing, and they got their little prayer things, and all this stuff. And you look at that, and all of these things, there's nothing spiritual in these things, even if they are then used for spiritual purposes. So you hang these little prayer things off the corners of their clothes, right? And you think, well, that's spiritual value. No, it isn't. That's a rosary bead. That is no different than a Catholic holding the rosary in their hand. It is a piece of cloth. There's no spiritual benefit to that at all. And there's nothing that a Jew can do with that little prayer thing. I forget what they call them now. The little prayer string. There's nothing that a Jew can do with that you can't do without that. It's like Catholics tied their little rosary beads. I need to pray. Where's my rosary? It's like, just pray. This was Jesus' whole point. You don't need to be in the temple. You don't need to be at a certain decibel value. You can go in your closet in secret and pray in secret, and your Father will hear you. Right. Jesus was saying there is no spiritual benefit to any of these things. So what's the benefit to it? Because it didn't change. It's not like the New Testament came along and changed the spiritual appreciation for the Old Testament commandments and regulations. The New Testament came along and made clear what was always true, which was that there was no spiritual benefit in any of those things in the Old Testament, any of them. So what was the benefit? Well, the benefit was it established a culture. And if you look at it, it's fascinating to me. If you consider it for a second, you have this nation that has been in slavery for 400 plus years, 400 to 430 years. They've been in slavery. Or they've been in Egypt. They've been in slavery maybe for 300 years of the 400 perhaps, because they didn't go into slavery right away. They were actually doing well. Joseph was alive. The Pharaoh that knew Joseph was alive. As long as that was the case, the Jewish people were doing great in Egypt. They were their own little separate state in Egypt. Well, then when the Pharaoh and Joseph died, and then everyone who knew about the deal they had died, well, then Egypt just swallowed them up and turned them into slaves. So you're looking at 300 years of slavery, let's just say. Think about what that did to the nation. What impact being a slave for 300 years, 5 generations would do. What moral impact? And how do you make someone a slave? You steal any identity they have. You have to abolish strip any sense of identity from them. You have to rip it away, completely decimate it, so that they will subjugate themselves to you. So then God brings out this group of people, let's say it's 1 million people, who have no sense of identity. They don't even know that 300 years, that's longer than the U.S. has been a nation. Consider that. That's a long time. They come out of there, they are demoralized, they have Stockholm Syndrome, and they have no sense of identity at all. And they're being pursued by the largest, most powerful nation on the known earth at the time. So what does God do? The first thing he does is authorize Moses to create the nation. Legislatively, through the 10 Commandments. Culturally, through the dietary laws, the dress laws, all the different laws. Religiously, through the temple, the sacraments, or all the ceremonies. All those things. God, if you look at the law in that way, then you see what he has done is he has established, he has built, he has cut out of whole cloth, completely out of thin air, fabricated a nation that did not exist. They existed ethnically as children of Abraham. That was their only bond they had, was that they maintained a genetic association. Right. But that was all they had. So this is why Moses is like one of the greatest leaders in all of human history. Not from a Christian standpoint, just from a governmental, just from a worldly standpoint. Moses is one of the greatest leaders of all human history, what he accomplished. Right. It's incredible what he did. He took in one generation and turned a slave demographic with no identity, he turned them into a nation. It's amazing. Yeah. incredible what Moses accomplished. And that's why you have these type of laws. That's why they're there. And that is the value of culture. And this is why Christians need to be looking for spouses in their culture. Must. It's not even about whether it's sin to marry someone who's lost. Let's say it's not. I'm willing to say it's not sin to marry someone who's lost. I'm not convinced it's sin. Like the way fornication is sin, or lying is sin, or murder is sin. I'm not convinced that marrying lost people, because there's plenty of evidence in the Bible of people marrying lost people.
Yeah, there is.
Lots of it.
And to have successful marriages.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
relatively speaking, maybe, but have successful marriages, raise successful kids.
Yes, but that's less likely.
It's much harder.
Much
more
harder.
difficult.
Because of the lack of shared culture. But this gets us into another point on the marriage. It's not just the Christian culture. I think that you need to be very careful marrying cross culture, like socially speaking. I've always not been a big fan of marrying, like Americans marrying Mexicans. Whenever anybody has asked me my opinion, I've always said I do not think it's a good idea. I don't think that it's always bad, but I think it's bad enough times that I wouldn't risk it. So when I was young, I was living in Mexico, and coming of age and thinking about marriage, I never once considered marrying someone in Mexico, because my grandfather, Dale, had told me that it was a very bad idea for marriage, generally speaking. Not saying that every instance of it is bad, but generally speaking, it's not a good idea. And so, what?
Well,
I heard that.
know.
Oh, Nolan wants in on that. He's got to defend his honor.
Yeah.
He should.
I haven't had any problems at all by marrying a Mexican. At least I don't think. Maybe
I
a
think
little
you
bit of
actually think it's in some ways has been beneficial.
Oh yeah, by far.
Well, see, a lot of people think that. So
Yeah.
Brett thinks that. You think that. A number of people do.
See,
So-
Anna adopted our culture
Well, so
extremely quickly.
yes. Well, see, here's the thing. Here's the thing, and this is where I said this isn't about each individual case. I'm speaking generally, and I'm playing the odds. So the way I think is, he says facts don't care about your feelings, scriptures don't care about your feelings. I actually don't care about feelings.
See, Anna
Period.
just said
I
that
hate feelings.
She doesn't have a problem with our culture. She has a problem with you.
I think that's it. So let me get this straight.
You're just
though.
mean, Anna. You're just mean.
In our small circle, we know several couples who married interracially have been.
Well, I'm not
very
against interracial
successful,
marriage.
But in your
I want to be clear. Intercultural. I don't care about
Intercultural.
race is a construct.
Okay, I misspoke.
I don't. Okay, I want to be very
understand.
clear. I don't care what color your skin is.
Right.
I don't care what ethnic background you come from. My issue is cultural issues.
Yes, I agree.
Right.
Well,
Which is why
I
even in the
understand your
U.S.
point.
I wouldn't marry interculturally. I was looking for someone who shared. When I got married, when I married you, it was the only marriage I've ever had. Because for some reason I thought I'd say when I married you. When we got married, like you said, we didn't really date. In our thought process, you were like, I want to marry a missionary, and I was thinking, I want to marry someone who is a lot like my family, a lot like my mom, right? I want to marry someone who I identify with in that way.
Yeah.
That was the culture I was looking for.
Right.
And I wanted them to speak my language. Like, language is real important
Language
to me.
is very.
And so I didn't want to be like going to family reunions and I'm having to translate for my wife what's being said. Now this goes to what you're saying. So Anna learned English very fast and speaks it very fluently.
Yeah, all of a sudden too. It wasn't like she never. All of a sudden, I get home and she's talking to me in English after a year of speaking pure Spanish. I mean, just Spanish all day long. And all of a sudden, I get home and I know what show she's been watching because she sounds exactly like the people in the show, but speaking great English from like.
Yeah,
out of
and she
nowhere.
understands the humor and everything.
Yes.
Yeah. So
I had.
so I mean,
so then what's the issue? That's my
I'm
point.
not-
I didn't mean to say race. I meant to say
I know.
cultural. So I don't understand what your issue is. The people that we know personally have very successful marriage, have the same background that you're talking about, from the same churches. That's basically, with our daughter-in-law and son, from the same type of family. Her parents are like us, and I don't understand as long as they marry somebody within the same
Language barrier is
religious,
huge, and not
cultural.
everybody who marries interculturally does their spouse learn the language.
right.
The reason why
I
Anna started
understand.
speaking English perfectly is because she couldn't stand the Spanish,
then
Nolan
you would
Spanish
say-
anymore.
I
My
don't
Spanish
agree
was
with
so
it.
bad, she just had to learn it as
She's
quickly
just
as
like, I
possible.
cannot. My ears are bleeding.
So then you would say, as long as you speak the same language, then it's fine. Then you would say
It's a big part of
you
it.
have a good chance of a successful.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with where they're born, right? It's not that someone's born in Mexico, but there is a lot of cultural uniqueness about Mexico that I think, will make marriage complicated. Especially in this case, especially if it's marrying a woman from another country marrying a Mexican man. You're going to find a lot of cultural uniqueness,
Yes,
right?
I would agree with that. There's a
That can
little
be
more
that can be difficult.
complications.
Yes, there will be more complications that way, I think. This is just the way I think, and it's nothing to do with race. It's to do with culture and how their cultures are. And I'm not even down on Mexican culture. I don't think that their cultural uniqueness is inferior at all. It's just different. And my view, I come from looking at it from a very statistical perspective. So when I look at marriage, when I did it for myself, even very young, and when I tell anyone to look at marriage, don't think about love. That is the wrong thing to think about. First of all, you don't even know what you're talking about. What you're calling love is not love, it's lust. So you're not even talking about love for the most part. But even if you were, that's not what you need to think about. You need to think about the data, the statistics, how statistically likely you are to be miserable. And if you're marrying into a culture, just think, would I want my daughter to marry that man's father? Forget about the age difference. But if it were my daughter marrying his father or her mother, it was my son marrying her mother, would you object to that marriage? Would you tell your child, don't marry them? If you don't like the father for your daughter, the character of that boy's father, the character of that girl's mother for your child, you're not going to like the person you're marrying. You see, when you put it into an objective language, then you're not
then you
then
get
you're not
into the
clouded by
argument-
romance.
Then you get into the argument of not letting the son pay the price for the sins of the father, and so you have to.
No, that's not the same thing. So I'm not punishing. Well, obviously, if I don't marry a woman, it's a punishment to her, her family, and the pot. The pock is
it's a
upon.
great punishment.
Yes, it's a tremendous
Yes,
punishment.
It's travesty.
Yes, I blessed your family.
You
I
did.
pitied them and pitied you. No, this isn't about bearing. When the Bible talks about that, it's talking about actual punishment, that someone be punished. But looking at the genetics and looking at the heritage and the legacy and the culture that a person shares, inevitably, you don't want to marry into one that you're not simpatico with. It's like if you had a visceral, or visceral is the wrong word, but a deep-seated disgust with the idea of children working when they're 15, like working for real in a job, and you married into my family,
Oh, it would be a huge problem.
humongous problem.
Yeah.
That is if anything differentiates my family from many families, it's this view of work and how everyone is working and
Yeah.
productively, and not just like pretending to work. Like, no, you're 12 and you want to work? Okay, let's go carry floor trusses on the third floor for 12 hours in 110-degree weather. Let's go. Let's go run the trusses. That's my family's view of kid gets a job in the summer.
Right.
Right? He's going to make $10,000 or he's a loser.
Right. No, we would have had serious problems.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And so this isn't about whether you're born in one country or another. It's not it at all. Although countries have cultures, right? Just like states do. And so I just think that when you're looking at marriage, if you want a successful marriage, you need to look at it mathematically as much as anything. And mathematically, you want to reduce the number of issues you're going to have in marriage, not increase them. You don't want to make them more. You want to make them less. Now, I know many, many people are going to disagree with me on this, and possibly I'm wrong, right? I'm just telling you how I looked at it. And I looked at it saying, I want to maximize my chance of being happy, not minimize it. So anything that I think would make it less.
There's nothing wrong with looking into this contract, if you will, of marriage, very practically minded. I think too many people, their heads are in the clouds and they're not thinking straight. They're thinking of the Cinderella story and the happily ever after. And you're not thinking practically, and it's so important. And I think that parents, even from the time that their kids are little, should start instilling these things of what to look for in a spouse. How Just how does he think? How does his parents think? How is he brought up? And it's okay. It's okay to think practically.
It's imperative that you think practically.
And I think because you and I are very practically minded, and I'm not, by no stretch of the imagination, am this mushy gushy, expect flowers every day. It makes me a little icky, I just don't like it. I don't like the attention in that way. So I'm naturally kind of adverse to the mushy gushy side of relationships. So I naturally can think very practically. And when Nolan decided to get married, to me, in my mind, it was so fast. I mean, I hounded that boy, and nothing against Anna or her. I loved her. It was him.
Yeah.
It's like, think about this, Nolan. You're this age, or, you had these plans, and think practical, Nolan. Get your head out of the clouds, get your head out of wherever it is, and let's really think this through and make sure you're making the right decision, because this is the rest of your life that we're talking about.
Yes.
And everybody knows in their head, okay, the honeymoon will be over. And usually, almost always, the honeymoon is over sooner than they think.
Hasn't ended yet.
So. Oh.
That's a good one, Nolan. So you have to say that, but in reality, we know it's not true.
It is true.
Yeah, right.
It is.
No, it's the honeymoon of expectations that's not reality. It's that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
So, yeah, no, I think you and I had a great first year of marriage. It was a lot of fun. We have that banter and that was another thing I wanted to talk about, talking about bantering. You kept saying, when you had this podcast with Danny, and I loved that podcast. It's probably one of my favorite ones. You kept saying, yeah, Terri and I fight a lot. We're always calling each other stupid. Michael, stop saying that. But then, I can't really deny it.
But say how you really said it. You said, stop saying that, stupid.
Yeah, you idiot. No. No, I know. And yes, it sounds terrible, but you and I have a certain humor. And I think because we have a good sense of humor and we can tease each other, and we're both very confident. Like, I don't have necessarily low self-esteem, and you for sure don't. So we can do that, and it's fun. And I think also because we have a good sense of humor, because we don't take ourselves so seriously, that has saved us from a lot of big arguing. Like, we can kind of, not that we're being passive aggressive, but we can just we can let out small irritations in a humorous way without it becoming
but we find humor in them.
Fight, and we do find humor.
We're not just doing it in a humorous way. We actually find humor in them.
Yes.
So, there's things about you, lots of things, lots and lots and lots and lots of things that drive me bonkers. Just crazy.
Lots of things, really? Lots and lots?
Lots. You have no idea.
Well, if you would tell me.
Oh, yeah,
we
right.
tell you?
Oh, I tell you.
Remember the time you bought that one can of spray paint? Come on.
Yeah, we go to Home Depot to buy paint, to paint a piece of thing, and you buy one can instead of two.
I don't want to overbuy. It's the perfect amount. And it was, Nolan. It was the perfect
Was it, Nolan?
amount of paint. It was.
I would say no.
The last drop, it's perfectly covered with the furniture.
It's only like $3 can.
I know. No, it's not probably. Yeah, exactly. It's
Well, right, but that
$3.
is the difference between
And then
me
it
and
looked
you.
like I was gonna have to go back to Home Depot to buy
Yes.
another can.
All
like,
anybody has to do is go to your shop and see the difference between me and you.
yes. Well, I think. Well, I may need spray paint at some
This
point.
is why people ask me how I do it.
And for your, I mean, Dad's the other extreme by far. He has 16 routers that are never ever be used, and he protects them like they're his babies.
Yes.
Not my babies.
My babies.
My routers.
Yes.
He's a hoarder.
He's a hoarder.
He is
He's
a
borderline hoarder.
Yes, he assumes he's gonna use everything in his shop one day. That's why he doesn't throw it out, even though he'll never. He has, and give him credit. A lot of the problem is because he's like not all there, and he hides. I don't know if he's hiding it. He puts things in spots that he forgets where he puts them, so he
yes.
orders it again. And then he
Right.
finds those, and then he grabs all of them together, puts them somewhere, and he goes, "I had 15 of them. I'm gonna have to buy 15 more." I'm like, "You never needed the first one. That's like, it's okay not to ever find them. You're never gonna use them."
Right.
Every tool I have has made its money
How many times have you heard that?
Oh,
every time I use it.
yeah.
My tools are the only employee I have that makes its own money, that is productive. All the rest of my employees cost me money. My tools make me money every day.
Even the ones you can't find. That don't
Every
even
one of
exist.
them. Even those are better employees.
Let's see.
So what would you be if you were talking to a couple that wants to get engaged? What would be your top three pieces of advice for them?
Well, I can say this, that when in any kind of relationship that you have prior to your spouse, your relationships put up with certain things or not put up with certain things because they don't have to, a part of your personality, right? So you can be quirky and you can be all these things, and your sibling can just blow you off and say, I don't have to deal with this. Your friends can either be your friend or not. You can. They're not always going to be honest with you.
Right.
It's like there are relationships that are not superficial, but they're just not. You don't have to live with them day in and day out. And then your parents, well, they're not objective, right? So your faults are. It's not going to bother them like it would somebody else. So now you're married. Now you're bringing yourself and all your faults and all your flaws into a marriage relationship. That your spouse is going to then have to deal with that every day. And if they consider their vows to you till death, it's forever. And so all of the sudden, your faults are then magnified to your spouse, and they call you out on it where no one else has before. And so then you become offensive. You become defensive and offended. How can you say that about me? That's not true. No one's ever told me that before. That's not who I am. You're being too critical. You're seeing things about me that is not true. You're putting too much emphasis on that when they're really not. They're saying, look, I love you, but there are things about you that are not that great, and I'm going to point that out to you. And so then that's what you need to do. It's almost like a gift, if you can look at it that way. So when you get married, the person who loves you the most, the person who's going to stick life out with you, that's going to raise kids together, that you're going to build a home and you're going to build a life, they're telling you and they're showing you a mirror and they're telling you, look, this is what you're like. And I'm going to tell you because I love you and because these are the things that I think that you need to change. That gives you an insight into yourself, into what you're really like. So you need to take those things seriously and not be so dismissive or defensive about it, and really say, okay, you know what? No one's ever done that before because nobody has to.
Yeah.
Nobody has to stick around.
Right.
My friends don't have to stick around. My siblings, they have their own life. They can do whatever they want. They don't have to be around me 24/7, but your spouse does. Your spouse has to live with all of those faults, with all of your shortcomings. And so they're showing it to you. And so you take that this is why I've asked you several times, and you've asked me, what is it? How can we change? What is it about me so that I can make your life better? Because I love you. I don't want to be an irritant to you. I don't want to be a thorn in your flesh. So it's very important to me because of my feelings towards you, that I want you to want to come home to me every day. I don't want you to dread it. So then those things that irritate you so much that, and I know that you say, I know that you're joking. I think those are
joking.
things that
my
it's not
point
a
was
big deal.
my point when I said that was they irritate me, but I find a great deal of humor in them. They don't
Exactly.
irritate me like I'm like angry.
No,
Hardly
no.
ever.
And I take it that way.
I mean, I'm irritated. I'm like, oh, I can't believe you do that.
Which
But
is
I think
why we
it's
laugh
but I
about
think
it.
it's hilarious, right?
Right.
I don't
Right.
take it like it doesn't anger me.
Right.
Like when you take 3 cornflakes out of the bowl and put them back in the box, it's like so stupid.
Yes, and
but
it's
it's
something
not-
you can talk about in
but
my
it's-
funeral, right?
Yeah, and it's not something that I'm like
No.
that I loathe or that I find that what's the word? There's a word for it that I'm contemptuous about. To me, it
Yes.
endears me. It endears you to me. It's like that's who you are. It's so funny how you are. I mean, there's times when it's annoying, like when you buy one and you should have bought 2. That way you would have enough, and you don't, and then we got to go back and get another one, and
Of
it's like,
course.
you know,
You mean I'm not perfect?
no.
I'm not perfect.
Like, you buy, how many mushrooms do we need? 5, 7? I'm like, buy the stupid container.
Because I'm very
Oh, I know.
exact. Kind
Oh
of.
yeah.
So I would say that I would look at your disagreements in that and through that lens. Like this is and you don't have to be ugly. You don't have to be. It's constructual criticism. And so it's okay, and it is okay for a wife to tell her husband, that's being a jerk. You're not, and maybe not in those words, but
No, I think
this
that's
is
fine.
not acceptable. That behavior is not acceptable. And this is how you make me feel. This is how you make other people feel. That behavior, whatever it is, it's childish. It's not becoming. It's not becoming of you as a man. It's not becoming of you as an adult, as a father, as a husband, as a preacher, as a teacher, whatever it is. I don't have to accept that. And I'm showing you a picture of yourself, and you ought to take a very close
Yes.
look and see, look, this is what I see. This is what I see every day. And if you respect my opinion, you will take what I have to say seriously and not be defensive or offended about it and really listen. So that would be the first thing that I would like for people to take into their marriage, or especially if they're starting out, is to look at their disagreements that way, very constructive.
That's good.
And then another thing would be is stay on the same page as far as finances go. To me, that's very, very, very important. And every family, every couple is different in that way. So, there's certain things that you'd have to, really get out. And having a shared interest is very important. And you and I are very, very different in our interest. They really are from one end to the other, very extreme. However, we've found at different times and stages of our marriage, different things that we can come together and where we have our best conversations. It's usually in the kitchen where we both cook. You enjoy cooking. I enjoy watching you cook.
Yeah. Enjoy
So,
eating what I cook.
Yes, and that too. And obviously helping and what have you.
Cleaning.
Definitely the cleaning.
Yeah, I hate the cleaning.
So, it's things like that where you can come together and enjoy each other's company, just finding that something, and then the desire to want to make your spouse a better person, and seeing in your spouse what you saw and never forgetting what you saw in them in the beginning. Like I saw you when I married you. I knew obviously, the immaturity that was there naturally, just because of your age. But I saw something in you that I wanted to be a part of. And it wasn't just the ministry, it was your life. I wanted to be a part of that. And it's been a roller coaster. It's been scary sometimes, but I wanted to be part of that life, because there's something in you that I saw that was very exciting. All the ways, the way you think and all the differences and the way you stand out like a sore thumb, even though it's scary, it's exciting for me. I like that. And honestly, we've become more of the same since then, where I had more problems in the beginning, just didn't know how to voice it. Whereas now it's like, okay, we're much more compatible, doctrinally and the different things like that than probably we ever have been.
Yeah, you've become more comfortable with standing out, and I've become less sore thumbish.
Yes, and we've complemented each other in that way. No, and I
We've
agree.
brought
And
each other more towards a center.
Yes, and that is bringing out the best aspects of your spouse. It's taking that responsibility seriously, because we can bring out the very, very, very worst in our spouse and make them a terrible person where nobody wants to be around. Or we can try and bring out the best, because I see what's in you that nobody else sees, and I want other people to see that. So it's important for me to try to make you better. And because I think you've done that for me. I mean, I really have no complaints. You treat me literally like a queen. I have no complaints, and I'm not just flattering you because we're on
Because you want to be
camera.
back on my podcast?
No, I mean, I told you this many, many times.
Yeah.
I have no reason. I have absolutely none. I feel like I don't even deserve you. So, but you've brought out these things in me, and I wanted to do the same for you. So it's just that mutual bringing out the best in your spouse. I want you to like me. I want to like you. So I want you to be on your best behavior, because I don't like being mad at you, and there are days that I don't like you.
Mm-hmm.
And just bringing out the best in each other. And I just think that if you just constantly are doing your best, that to look at marriage through that lens is growing together for a mutual and a common end. It's very important. And that's where I want to end my life, That's where I see my life going, and that's what I want.
Very good. One thing you mentioned that I think is important, I liked everything you said, but one of the things that, especially the part where you don't deserve me, I really like that part.
Of course you do.
I'll remember that. Can we get that graven on this table?
I've already got it in order.
Thank you. I need a plaque right here that says that. No, one of the things I think that you said that I think needs to be really considered, given our common background in Christianity. And this is one of the things I have the utmost respect for the church that we come from and I don't just mean the single congregation, but the brand of Christianity, as what I often call it, that we come from, widely speaking. I have just the highest respect for it. I think that I wish all Christians had that opportunity to do there. But there's a number of places, right? So if you looked at church like a big soundboard that has a bunch of dials where you change you equalize the sound so that you bring down some things that in the sound that's not real good, and you amplify ones that are better. There's some dials I would dial back,
Right.
in our common Christian culture that we have together.
Yeah.
And one of those that I would really dial back, and have tried to do so lately, is this idea, and I don't know that it's ever been stated or anyone would ever say, "Oh yeah, we believe that." But I think it's a given. I think that it's there, and it's not dealt with. If no one agrees with it and thinks it shouldn't be that way, nobody's dealing with it that I can see. And that is the idea that the wife really, if you don't agree with your husband, pray for him. And I think this is just a terrible, terrible idea. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's not a teaching. I don't want to go so far as to say that anybody is teaching this in church, teaching this in marriage. If they are, then it's terrible. Mm-hmm. But let's assume, give everyone the benefit of the doubt, and nobody actually thinks that's the way it should be, and nobody's actually saying it should be that way. I know that it's prevalent enough. There's enough people that think it's that way that in their mind it's being taught, right? Mm-hmm. It's one of those things where everyone who teaches can lift up their hands and go, "I never said that. I don't think that." And and I'm not doubting their sincerity. Okay, fine. You didn't think that way, you don't live that way, and you don't teach that way. But for some reason, a large percentage of the women and men in these congregations think it's that way, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you're not teaching it, maybe you don't believe it, but it's coming from somewhere, right? It's too prevalent and widespread to not be the case. And the idea is that a woman's role in marriage, if she disagrees with her husband, is to basically pray for him and that he's the king and
God will change it.
God will change. I can't, all that language just makes me sick to my stomach. First off, just bleh, hate all that. Anyways, he's the king and it's just so disgusting to me. I can't even hardly say it without getting sick to my stomach. Anyway. But yeah, just wait for God to change him, and no. That is not, and that's one thing I regret in myself when we first got married, and for a good portion of our marriage, is that I had that idea. That was my view. I think that was your view, kind of, was basically for whatever reason, and so I was very misbehaved, and you didn't say anything.
Nope.
And I think that was a mistake on both of our parts.
Well, a funny story, until it was a certain point where, you would lose your temper real bad, right?
No.
Real bad.
No.
Yeah. So.
You lie.
So the kids, I don't even know if we did. We have Nolan at the time. I don't remember. But I had decided, so you would lose your temper. And one time I had a mop bucket right there. I hadn't emptied out the water at one time. And you kicked the mop bucket. You were super mad. And kicked the mop bucket and water went everywhere. And clean it up, woman. No, you didn't say that. But, I cleaned it up, right?
Well, we could just let it dry.
Yeah, because you weren't going to clean it up. We all knew that. So, yeah, and it was over. And I didn't say anything. I was super mad. But, I'm not one to just, want to be in a fight. So I just let it go. But I had decided that, you know what? This is not acceptable behavior. So instead of arguing with him about this, the next time it happens, I'm going to join in so that you see what it looks like, right?
Yeah, let me tell the story.
Go ahead. Tell the story from here on in. But that was my way of, that was my
That was your thought
mentality.
process at the time.
Yes.
So then I get mad and I grab something and I threw something, right?
Yeah, your frying pan.
Yeah,
banged it on
threw it or whatever. And she goes, oh yeah. You wanna, I can do that too.
Show you
So
what
she
this
grabs,
is like.
I can do that. So she grabs one of her vases.
Yeah.
And she goes like this. And then she looks at it. And she sets it back down. And then she grabs, he had a little stuffed bear, a rabbit.
Yeah,
a little rabbit, little stuffed rabbit. She grabs the stuffed rabbit and throws it on the floor. See, I can do it. And I died laughing. I was laying on the ground, laughing. Because it was you can't even do mad good.
No, I couldn't. It was calculated.
Yes.
I was thinking, this was my opportunity. Great. He threw a fit. I'm going to show him what it's like. To see how stupid and immature it is. I can play at this game too.
It's so stupid. She couldn't do it.
No, I
She
couldn't.
threw a rabbit on the
couldn't.
floor.
That's how horrid that behavior is. I couldn't even do it. I could not participate as much as I wanted to.
That's so
That's how
funny.
horrid
Yes.
it is.
I know, it's so
gonna-
funny.
I was going to show you what's
Yeah,
what.
you showed me. That was so funny. That was the end of the argument. We were just laughing
It
and
was.
laughing
It was
and
the end of
laughing.
the argument. However, you did kind of take it to heart a little bit, and so you dialed back tremendously.
Yeah, that was something I worked on that year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So back
And
to
so
your
back
point.
to the point. So the role of a wife and of a husband, but in this case dealing with this issue on this particular one, the role of a wife in the marriage is to tell her husband when he's being a jackass. And if you are not allowed to do that, then what do you want a wife for? I know that this may not, everyone's going to deny. There's all this plausible deniability. They're all going to deny that they teach this. And yet, I know it's so prevalent because I've counseled so many people. And I've had so many women say, well, it's not my place to tell him. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is your place to say, you are wrong. You are behaving poorly. You are not supposed to behave this way. And a husband should listen.
Yes.
Should listen.
Yes.
That is why you have a wife and not another child.
That's right.
It's why you have a wife and not a maid who comes in and cleans things. Marriage just isn't about sanctifying sex. That's not what it's all about. Marriage is about having a helpmeet.
Yes.
Somebody who is a partner.
Right.
That is what a helpmeet
And
is.
it helps you become a better person.
Yes.
Yes. And just because like it's okay that he or she acts this way, I can live with it, I can deal with it, but do you know what? The testimony out there and what other people are seeing, that's not right.
And no one else is going to put up with it.
No.
So you're allowing your spouse, whether it's, and this goes both ways.
Yes, it
It goes
does.
both ways.
Yes, it does.
But you're allowing your spouse to be a person that nobody can stand. It's like parents who allow their children to be people that nobody in the world will be able to put up with, thinking that somehow that's love. That's not love. Parents have to tell their children, you're being a brat, and even though I will always love you, nobody is going to like you. You have to learn to behave yourself.
Yeah.
You have to learn to behave yourself in a culturally acceptable way, socially acceptable way, religiously, every way you have to learn. It's like parents that let their kids roll around in church, right? I'm okay with kids like coloring or whatever. I don't think they have to be sitting in rapt attention.
No.
But they need to know how to sit still, reasonably still, acceptably still. They don't have to be statues. But rolling around on the floor and stuff, you're like, why? Well, they're little kids. They need to learn how to behave in a culturally acceptable way. That is not the way you would want a child to act if they go to a play, or if they go to a graduation ceremony, or if they go to a wedding. Any of these things, even if you don't have any spiritual regard for the meeting or for the church, you should look at it as a time when you teach your kids to behave culturally in a culturally acceptable way. Many of us, I'm one of the best examples of somebody who was terribly culturally not adapted.
Yeah.
Culturally very not adapted.
Right.
I did not fit into any type of
Social
civilized social setting at
Yeah.
all,
Right.
in any way. And I needed a wife that was going to tell me that.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of our marriage, I don't think that either one of us thought that was the place of a woman, or
Right.
of a woman in marriage,
Right.
to be that person.
Right.
But there is no other person.
There is no other person.
There's no one else.
No.
And yeah, I understand. Look, nobody wants to hear it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I can drink scorn like water. I won't
course
give
not.
you the image because it grosses you out, but like I did with Betsy.
Yeah, don't do that.
But I'm not saying that I'm like that. I mean, nobody likes criticism. But we need to be criticized. We need people who will tell us the truth. And most of our friends, and I don't mean us specifically, I'm not trying to besmirch any of our friends.
No.
Most people's friends are not that good of friends.
No.
They are not going to say, you are behaving poorly.
Right.
You're behaving like a brat and you need to stop it. They're not willing to, and that's what you're saying. That's the point you made. They just say, look, all I got to do is put up with it for an hour.
Yeah. For
Yeah,
the most
whatever.
part, I enjoy their company.
Yeah,
I
I'll go
can just
home.
not talk to them for a couple of days, and it's all fine.
Exactly. And that's how they look at it. And they're only thinking of
And it's
themselves.
okay. Yeah.
They're only thinking of themselves, and they're like, I don't want to risk losing that friendship. I'd rather just enjoy it a little less
Right.
and not risk losing it altogether if I come out and say, you're behaving like a brat and you need to cut it out.
Yeah.
Do not treat people that way, or don't talk that way, or whatever. Whatever it is, you're behaving like a brat and cut it out. And then I might lose this person as a friend. And you probably will, because most people are not been prepared when they were children to know how to accept that kind of criticism.
Yeah.
I mean, they're told when they're little kids how wonderful they are,
Right.
and how great they are, and how special they are.
Right.
When most kids are not special. And parents telling their kids they're special is just like a terrible thing to do. You can say, hey, you're special to me. So I was always honest with our kids. You're special to me. You're average and plain, and you're never going to stand out, but you're special to me, right?
Okay. I'll let that go. We won't argue about that.
It's messed up.
It is a little messed up.
Well, I just believe in the truth.
Yeah.
Anyways. But
Your
but
kids
yeah.
love you for it.
Yeah, they do. But yeah, you're not going to have friends that are going to do it. Your parents aren't going to do it because they only see perfection.
Yeah.
Right? They're your parents,
Basically.
or if they know it, they're like, we're tired of raising this kid.
Yeah.
Well, he's gone.
Yeah, he's not my problem.
He's not my
anymore.
problem.
That's
That's
what
the
your dad
best
told
thing.
me. Your dad, exactly. He told me that. I'm glad he's your problem and not mine. That's what he said. He's all yours now. Don't you come crying home to me.
Don't send him home.
Yeah, don't
you
send
keep
him
him.
home.
Yeah, exactly. So so who's going to do it? And this whole thing, well, you'll pray for him. Yes, God. I hate Christians when they talk about prayer like if prayer is independent of reality,
Right.
right? And their mind, when I talk like this about prayer, then their mind they hear that I'm diminishing prayer. It's exactly the opposite. Everything is turned around in these people's heads. Prayer is not independent of reality. It interacts with reality, which means when Jesus tells the apostles, pray. The fields are white unto the harvest. There's, much is to be harvested. There's very few people to do it. Pray that God would send forth laborers into the harvest. Mm-hmm. Then they pray, and the next verse, he sends them into the harvest. Mm-hmm. See, everyone wants to stop at the prayer verse. They're like, well, let's pray for something to happen. They don't read that the next verse, Jesus is saying, okay, now you go to the harvest. It has to be tied to reality.
Right.
Praying for someone to improve is not a cop-out or a substitute for you, the generic person,
Taking action
and then going to the person saying, I've prayed for you that God would change you because you're behaving like a brat. Mm-hmm. And you need to clean up your act. Mm-hmm. And I'm willing to lose you as a friend to tell you that. Mm-hmm. And 9 times out of 10, they're not going to be your friend anymore. Absolutely true. That's true. But friends aren't going to do it, which is why we have spouses. And when you get married, if I was telling someone who wanted to get married, probably the first thing I would tell them is you need to make peace with the idea that you need somebody to tell you everything you don't want to hear. And your spouse is the person that God designed to be that, to tell you the things you don't want to hear so you can be a better person. And you need to make peace with that and be willing to accept that criticism.
Right.
Now, it needs to be done right. It can't
Yes,
be
it
done
does.
when you're mad
No.
as a vengeance, as a weapon against your spouse. It's like, oh, you made me mad? Well, I'm going to tell you, Mike said I should tell you you're being a jackass.
Yeah. No.
No, it can't be that way.
It's not in that way at all.
No, it has to be done in the right way and at the right time.
Yeah.
And if a wife or a husband really, really cares and is doing it for that person to be better, not for their sake, but for their own sake,
Yes.
then they will be looking at the right time and the right place. Now, I'm not saying they'll always get it right, but their intention will be, when is the right time, when is the right place,
Right.
when we can say, let's have this conversation. And one way to do this, and we never did this, and I wish we had, but no one told me this,
Yeah.
and no one in my family had this view. I mean, that was not the prevalent view in my family of what a wife's place was or a role was in the marriage. So nobody ever told me this. I wish they had, and I wish they would have said, you need to set aside basically a counseling time, like if you go to a counselor, but you sit down and you speak to each other honestly.
Yeah.
This is where I think you are falling short. And you got to be selective. You can't have a laundry list.
Yes.
You can't have 49 things.
Yes. That's
Right?
overwhelming.
So one
for
of the things I did right about the same time probably that incident with where you demolished the stuffed bunny rabbit on the floor. You just crushed it on the floor. It was probably right around that time, maybe it was a little earlier than that, just maybe a year before that I had realized because of a number of different things that happened in our life and in my life and ministry and everything, that I had some things I really needed to work on and I needed to change if I wanted to have any success in life across the board. And so I made a list of those things, and then I ordered them in the order I thought most egregious or most important, and then I worked on one thing at a time. I would just pick the top one on the list and try to change that in myself.
Right.
So one of those things on the list was my temper. I would smash my fist in the wall, kick the doors, break stuff. And there's a certain amount of youthfulness tied to that.
Yeah,
I mean,
of
young
course.
men have more of that
Yes,
naturally.
yes.
And so I was also getting older. As you get older, you
temper all
you
those
temper,
things.
and also, it's like photography. The further you are from things, right, the more distance you have, everything looks more proportional. So if you get a camera and take a picture of somebody real close, even if they're in focus, every feature will be magnified. Your nose will be enormous. Your ears will be sticking out huge like Mickey Mouse because the cameras. But the further the camera is away, it's why portrait photography, they use long lenses a lot of times because they get far away, but they get you tight in the camera. But then everything is very flattering. Everything just looks proportional. Yeah. So as you get longer away in life, looking at life through this longer lens, everything becomes more proportional. This setback today doesn't look like this enormous honker of a nose sticking out of your face. Now it looks proportional because you're looking at life through a much longer lens, which a young man doesn't have.
No.
A young person doesn't have a long lens in life yet. They have a very short lens, and everything looks huge
A very
and up
small
close.
frame of reference.
Very small. Very small. And so a lot of that was that. But it was also because I had never been really intellectually, even though I'm not sure that it was an intellectual challenge you provided, because, that was kind of ridiculous, I have to say, how you did it. But I'd never been really challenged on the silliness, the stupidity of how it looked, at least none that I can remember. And that did. And so, anyways, that was on my list, and I start working on those things. And I think in marriage, we need to provide each other that list, and it needs to really be thought out.
Yeah.
This idea that I'm going to tell you everything I don't like about you and I want you to change it, that's not going to be helpful.
No.
But to say, look, I love you and I love so many things about you. Here's one thing you should work on that is really hurting you. It's hurting you it may not even be with you, right? It may not be with the spouse. It may not be that it bothers me personally, but I know it's diminishing you with your peers. I know it's diminishing you with your ministry. I know it's diminishing you in your job. And I want you to succeed. And this is something you need to work on. And then the spouse needs to take that real seriously and take it to heart and say, okay, and they need to really work on it.
Yeah.
That's why when people tell me you can't change, this is how I am, I can't change, I don't accept that. That's bogus. I've changed dramatically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dramatically. And it isn't because I got older. That
No,
helps,
it's
but
'cause
that's
you
not
put
why.
a conscious effort.
I still do. I put a very conscious effort into not being who I was yesterday. Very much so.
Yeah.
I think too many people, and Christians are this way most egregiously, not because they're more that way, but because they have less reason to be that way. Christians of all people should be people who change constantly. We are called, Paul says, not to be conformed conformed to this world, but transformed in the spirit of our mind. So the natural spiritual state of a Christian is change, not staying the same. Change. And Christians are adverse to change. Everybody is. But Christians have no excuse. And so how are you going to change? I mean, it's really hard. I made my own list, and I found that I left things off that should have been on. I put things on that shouldn't have been, because it's very hard to be objective about yourself.
Yeah.
That's why you have if you're married, that's why you have a spouse. You have somebody who loves you the way you love you, allegedly, and is looking out at you, though, as somebody else.
Yeah.
So it's as if you could look at yourself from across the
Because if
room.
you don't have anybody like that, and that's one of the setbacks of people who choose to remain single, is that you have nobody in your life to tell you, so you remain the same,
Yeah.
good or bad.
Yes.
You don't. Nobody challenges
You
that
hunker
way.
down, exactly.
Yeah, you're like, I'm fine. Everyone seems to like me, but really
Yeah, but they
you're
don't live
not.
with you 24 hours a day.
Exactly. There's no evolving. There's
Yeah.
no becoming better. That nobody to improve for.
Yes.
For that matter, why bother?
Yeah,
You
exactly.
might as well stay the same. I mean, who cares? I live by myself and my dog. It doesn't matter. So that's one of the advantages to getting married, is that it actually improves you as a person.
Yeah, it's a huge
It's
impetus
supposed
and a
to.
huge push to
Yes.
being to improving, to changing,
Yes.
to correcting things.
Right.
Yes, I agree.
Right.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
All right. Well, is there anything else you need to get off your chest about me? Tell people how stupid I am.
No, I have to do that. Like, it has to be on the spur of the moment. You have to do something stupid, and then I'll then I'll just call you out on it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But right now we're good. I'm all good.
You're all good right now. I got all the trash taken out of the house yesterday that I made, and now she's happy.
Oh, there's still more.
Oh, there's
Oh,
more,
yeah,
huh?
there's more. We'll work on that later.
Okay. All right. Well, that's been very good. I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Yeah, it's fun.
You're always my favorite guest.
Yeah.
By far. We actually have a double header coming up tomorrow. Catherine or Katie Fitzharris is going to be on the podcast at 3:00. And we are going to be discussing free speech. I made a few comments on free speech that she would like to come on and address. Didn't agree with exactly what I had to say, and she's really big into that topic. We're also going to talk about feminism and going to talk about the left and the leftist tears, and probably a little bit about redemption. So I think it's very interesting. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
It's gonna be a good one.
Yeah, I worked real hard all week to get the studio ready for you and her today. So, that'll be tomorrow at Sunday at 3 p.m. We'll be live, and then of course you can watch it at any time, record it if you want to. If you have any suggestions for us, we are making some changes in the room where we're doing this and some of the equipment, and trying to do a better job, make it more interesting. My goal with these podcasts is to make something that is interesting and entertaining without sacrificing the truth. That's the goal. So if you don't think I am achieving that, or you think there's some way I can improve, I welcome your criticism. It isn't just Terri's criticism that I welcome. I welcome anyone's criticism. I'm not saying I'll like it, but I do welcome it. I would rather you tell me what I'm doing wrong than tell me what I'm doing right. So if there's something I can improve on, I would like for you to point that out. We are here every Saturday at 9 a.m. pretty much with guests that come on. If you know of anyone you would like to see on the podcast, let us know. You can find this podcast in audio format at Spotify and on iTunes. You can also find it at our Freeborn website, freebornchurch.com. And you can find it on YouTube in video at youtube.com/freebornchurch. And so you can go and find us in all those places. And we look forward to hearing from you in the comment section, or email us at podcast@freebornchurch.com. Podcast@freebornchurch.com. I'm Mike Jackson, your host. It's been great being with you.